Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the third part of What If Deku Was Trapped in GLaDOS's lab? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Right? Midoriya thought, teams. Think strategically here. He glanced around quickly, eyes landing on a few people. He noticed that there were groups of people crowding both Todoroki and Deku. Makes sense, he thought, they showed off their abilities. Midoriya. Wanna team up? He spun around at Uraraka's voice. She would be a very strong ally for the round. He grinned, holding up a hand for a fist bump. She smiled and bumped his fist. Great. Now two more. Let me think. Uraraka glanced around. I'd suggest Ida, but I think he's already in a group. Midoriya's head snapped up. Whose team? She pointed in the direction of Todoroki. Midoriya inadvertently made eye contact with Ida. The taller boy had a hardened look in his eye. It was something so unfamiliar, so unnatural on the kind boy's face. All Midoriya could feel was disappointment. He blinked and broke their eye contact. Well, ouch. He didn't say anything to you? She shook her head. Nope, I tried to get him to follow me over here, but he slipped from my grasp. I think he wants to prove something to himself, but I think he could have at least said it, you know? Midoriya found himself agreeing with her. Well, great, there goes that strategy. Who else dash? Midoriya, you bitch, get your ass over here. Uraraka flinched at the booming volume of Hatsum, who'd brought what looked like a loudspeaker of her own design. He pat her shoulder and made his way through the crowd that was now definitely staring at him. To be fair, most of his class didn't even know they could access the support labs, let alone know any of the support students. And they probably, definitely, didn't know that he spent a large amount of his time there. Uraraka reluctantly followed after him. Greenie, why didn't you seek me out instantly? I'm offended. I'm joking, but explain yourself. Midoriya grinned at her chaos. Sorry, Hatsum. I was distracted, some of my friends are acting weird today. This is Uraraka, by the way. Uraraka, this is Hatsum Mei from the support course. She's been helping me with some technical difficulties I've been having. Hatsum rolled her eyes playfully. Way to undersell our lifelong friendship, but yeah, nice to meet you. I like your hair. Do you use your quirk to keep it all fluffy like that? The brunette smiled, a little scared. Oh, yeah. But how do you know my quirk? Hatsum waved a hand nonchalantly. I like to know who my future clients will be. And also the support course does repairs on your costumes. By the way, your new one is amazing. I had a hand in designing it myself, and what can I say, I'm just the best engineer this school has ever had. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, smiling. If you couldn't tell, Hatsum here is very modest about her abilities. She leveled him with a scathing look. Shut up, I'll skin you alive. Midoriya smirked. Try it, I don't have enough skin for that to be a real threat. Uraraka chuckled in surprise. Or in fear, Midoriya couldn't really tell. Right, we'll have time to talk babies when we have a full team. Who else are you thinking? Midoriya tugged his lower lip, looking around again. Uraraka's gaze caught on Tokoyami, still without a team. Perfect, Midoriya, Hatsum. I know who to ask. The three pushed themselves through the crowd to the raven-feathered boy. Tokoyami, are you on a team yet? Want to join ours? His red eyes scanned the three, before nodding solemnly. Midoriya wasn't sure why, but everything he did translated to poetry in his head. Great, tell us everything about your quirk? The midnight form of Dark Shadow appeared, floating next to Tokoyami. This is Dark Shadow. He is my companion in this void of eternal suffering. He is sensitive to the light. The more intense the light, the weaker he becomes. He is his own conscious, but we are linked. Bound together by fate, perhaps, or some otherworldly power. Midoriya grinned. Nice, okay, I have an idea. But first, Hatsum? What babies did you bring today? Uraraka looked between them, confused. I'm sorry, babies? Hatsum had an absolutely shit-eating grin on her face. Why, you mean my ingenious inventions. Funny you should mention them. See, when we started working on equipment for the sports festival, Power Loader said, and I quote, "Whatever you make on school grounds and is of your own intellectual property goes, so get to work." So in conclusion, I may have gone a bit overboard. Midoriya internally cringed. What was overboard for one person was definitely not on the same level of what Hatsum considered overboard. She proceeded to pull out a series of vague cylinder shapes. Midoriya recognized one of them. Whoa, is that the Wheatley drone? Yep. All finished, and I made sure it would only blow up on command. Here, this visor is the receiver. Have you got your phone on you? Midoriya realized, stupidly, that yes, his phone was still on him. Tokoyami chuckled at his misery. A brief series of taps later and the Wheatley drone was active. Oh. Alright then, check me out. Oh look, I can. Oh, that's mad. I have complete range of motion? That is absolutely mad. I'm shocked, really. Thank you, miss. Very nifty, isn't she? Yeah. Midoriya smiled at the drone. Wheatley must have missed being able to move freely, being unattached to his service rail. Uraraka and Tokoyami seemed, for the most part, a little confused. They'd probably assumed that the voice was some weird program Hatsum had created specifically for the drone. Well, he hoped they would. In hindsight, they probably only had a passing interest in it as long as it helped them. Hey Wheatley, we're going to need your help for the next round of the sports festival, if you don't mind. Oh no, I don't mind at all, do I? No, put me to work, give me tasks. I am absolutely invigorated, ready for any challenge. Well, most challenges. Some challenges. Why don't you just tell me what to do so I can tell you if that is a challenge I am willing to try. Or, go ahead. Okay, we have you in the drone right now because we need you to try and keep an eye on all sides of us. You'll float above us and I can check your bird's eye view on the visor if there's any trouble. Okay? Oh yeah, that sounds like a grand job, doesn't it? Yeah, I can do that. I will fly with the elegance of a goose. Or, I dunno, another graceful avian. I don't really know much about birds. Pigeons maybe, but yeah, Midoriya smiled and nodded sharply. He turned back to Hatsum. What else have you got? Oh, I have these jetpacks, fully functional and will self-destruct on command, these shock absorbers for your shoes that will self-destruct on command. Though with your legs we may not be needing them, a few harpoons that will self-destruct on command, and a couple of other things. And a rocket launcher. Midoriya grinned ferally. Nice. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. I know what to do. Midoriya quickly relayed his plan to the members of his team, them nodding in sync. They organized themselves as a group, Hatsum at the front, Midoriya and Uraraka at the sides and Tokoyami as their rider. Wheatley took off into the air, flitting around like a hummingbird. Midnight cracked her whip, the sound echoing and reverberating through the arena. Alright, and that's time. If you have not already, please get into your formation. You will have 10 minutes from when the horn sounds to get as many points as possible. So think wisely and watch your backs. You will only be disqualified if your rider hits the ground. So go all out. Midoriya scanned the other 9 teams. Almost all of them had powerhouses at their behest. If Plan A didn't work, he would have minimal time to explain Plan B and possibly even Plan C. Although Midoriya was painfully aware that plans do not survive contact with the enemy. To be fair, the enemy in this case were his peers and not a murderous, but entertaining robot. At least he actually got cake here. He shook himself from his thoughts when he heard the absolutely booming sound of the horn. The sound made him flinch, but he could brush it off as being caught off guard. He hadn't exactly given his friends any reason to believe he had other issues he was dealing with behind the scenes. Aside from the scars maybe. He had gotten clearance to wear long sleeves this time around. It hadn't bothered him so far, it wasn't about to start bothering him. What was bothering him? The commentary. All right. Let's get started on the UA cavalry battle. I am begging you to tone it down. The teams all took off in one massive rush. To no one's surprise, all but about 3 teams immediately attacked Todoroki's group. Midoriya wanted to avoid them if at all possible. With the ice and presumably fire, all things considered, User himself, Ida, Kaminari and Yaoyorozu all on the one team, it was basically a guaranteed loss unless you made up some crazy clever tactics. Oh, what's this? Looks like everyone wants that 1 million. Have you ever seen so many kids working together like this? Not everyone, some teams are hanging back. Smart move. Midoriya shuddered at the thought of getting into a confrontation with Kaminari again. He also was tempted to wipe his brow in relief that Yaoyorozu had never decided to create a gun. If at all possible, we should avoid Todoroki's group. They have the million, so they'll probably just be on the defense. Stay out of their line of sight at every opportunity. The other teams, the few that didn't go for the 1 million, charged Bakuga's group. In other words, they were signing their own death warrants. Midoriya ignored the sound of the explosive boy to their left, and instead focused on passing his headband up to Tokoyami, as Uraraka and Hatsum did the same, all while jogging away from the swarm of students. Remember, turn them inside out. At the very least, if someone does come after us, we won't have to worry about being targeted. He nodded to Uraraka and double-tapped Hatsum's shoulder. Step 2 of the plan, get the hell out of Dodge. Midoriya was fully aware that the teams that went for Todoroki would eventually come to the realization that they could lose their own precious points. To avoid a sudden onslaught of attackers themselves, they would use a mixture of his, Tokoyami and Uraraka's quirk, and Hatsum's tech. Uraraka tapped them all with 5 fingers. Midoriya was slightly disoriented by the lack of gravity, but the feeling vanished when Hatsum's jetpacks kicked in, blasting them high into the air. They were an experimental design, leg attachments rather than a massive backpack. He liked them, it was an interesting concept. If they held until the end, Hatsum could really attract some attention. While in the air, there wasn't much to do other than watch their classmates. The other teams seemed to be hunting each other in a more balanced fashion, with Todoroki's team holding off maybe 2 or 3 groups. Uraraka called their attention. I have to take a break, is it safe to drop down? Midoriya had a look at the floor below them on the visor, taking stock of who was where. Yep, let us go. Wheatley, call out if anything changes. She tapped her hands together and immediately they started plummeting. Midoriya wasn't nervous, he'd done this thousands of times. Not with 3 people relying on him to stop their legs from breaking, but hey, first time for everything. Well, that's an exaggeration. They were wearing Hatsum's shock absorbers. The plan here was that he'd absorb the brunt of the shock, and they would land safely with their own cheaper version of what he had. He could do without Hisashi's attention though. Huh. Yo Eraser, what are those lunatics attempting? I'm not sure. Midoriya Izuku, quirk, portal. Uraraka Ochako quirk, zero gravity. Tokoyami Fumikage quirk, dark shadow. Hatsume quirk, who knows what those 4 could come up with? He honestly wished they would stop very unsubtlety drawing attention to him. Maybe they were trying to make up for not spotting him in the obstacle course, as if that wasn't what he wanted. Right? They're plummeting to their deaths. He snickered to himself as he angled himself lower than his teammates. Tokoyami looked sick to his stomach, clearly not knowing what to expect. Uraraka looked nauseous but determined. Hatsum was laughing her head off. The teams near them had stalled in their hunt, gaping openly at the 4 falling from the sky. He could hear the gasps from the crowd as they got closer, closer. Midoriya slammed his legs into the ground, letting his body absorb the shock. A millisecond later, his team were safely deposited on the ground, minus a strong case of whiplash. Present Mike screamed. He could hear the roar from the crowd bouncing around the stadium. Todoroki was looking at him like he had just insulted his entire family tree. Midoriya was so confused by his behavior. Hey, wanna hunt for some headbands? When all he got were affirming nods, he let himself smirk. Then let the games begin. They were attacked, naturally. But Hatsum's technology did a great job against the less offensive quirks. She tossed Midoriya a gun filled with flashbangs, and he giggled like a maniac as he blinded a metal kid. Ah, Machiavelli, you punk! Dark Shadow, who had hidden before he shot the flashbang, emerged loud and proud. It snatched a few headbands and punched some children back in one swoop, gently tying the headbands inside out on Tokoyami's neck. Uraraka held them all up in the air a second time, much shorter than the last. This time, it was to get away from Bakugo. Apparently he didn't like it when his horse got his headband stolen. Kirishima was competitive, but was in good spirits about it. Bakugo less so. Tokoyami sent Dark Shadow to smack him out of the air, but the explosive light was too much for it. Thinking on his feet, Midoriya cocked the gun again. The sound reverberated through the air. Bakugo was stunned at the sight. Credit where credit is due, the gun looked real. Like really real. Eerily close to the real deal. Hatsum was meticulous about her designs, though. So it definitely was by no mistake that the flashbang gun struck fear into those that stared down the barrel. Midoriya's aim was flawless, firing directly into the path of the blonde boy. The light shocked him, giving Hatsum the perfect opportunity to show off even more of her babies. She pulled out an odd-looking and comically large gun. Like something out of a cartoon, very round and brightly colored. Probably to draw attention. The weapon activated, shooting Bakugo back to Earth with a concentrated blast of air. His teammates kept him from being disqualified, but it was still a satisfying takedown. An unfortunate side effect being that they were also blasted back from the force of it. They landed similarly to last time. Surprisingly, the other teams didn't seem interested in possibly being crushed by the combined weight of 4 people. Midoriya quickly scanned his surroundings, trying to come up with the best course of action. Wheatley hadn't started yelling any obscenities yet, so they were probably in the clear. That is, until another team decided to go after them. Oi, incoming. 2 o'clock. Or is it 4 o'clock? I dunno. I never understood the whole clock equaling direction thing. The same blonde boy that pissed Midoriya off after the USJ incident, Monoma, was the rider. A fucking course. Looking smug. He was always looking smug somehow. People like that really rubbed him the wrong way. How could someone live their lives never thinking that anything they did was wrong? No, if it was them, it meant they were 100% correct no matter what. Either that or he was a little bitch. Midoriya was inclined to believe the latter. Well, if it isn't more of Class 1A? I see you picked up a stray somewhere along the way. Hatsum wasn't even paying attention to him, which only pissed him off more. Oh look, Uraraka, if it isn't the cheap, second-rate version of Bakugo from the other class. I wonder what he's got up his sleeves for us today. The boy's eye twitched. Okay, maybe intentionally pissing him off wasn't a good idea. I'll be taking those headbands now. Their teams stared each other down. Midoriya wasn't sure what power he had. Nothing that affected his looks too much. He did kinda look feral, but that might be unrelated. A boy with brown hair cupped his hands around his mouth and exhaled sharply. Midoriya watched in fascination as the air solidified and became invisible. He took the initiative to test a theory, by kicking some soil up at the invisible air? He wasn't really sure what to call it. The dirt smacked against the hardened air, falling back to the floor. His eyes sharpened, turning dark in anticipation. Okay, avoid that space in front of us, it's probably some kind of wall. They scooted in a half-crescent shape, keeping an eye on the other team and kicking up dirt at the wall. Until the dirt kept moving. The other team barely gave them time to blink before rushing them. For a few intense moments, all Midoriya could hear was the screaming of Hizashi and the monotone of Shoyuta and the shifting of fabric and the thumping of feet on the ground and Dark Shadow flying everywhere, and there was someone touching him. He lashed out with a closed fist, punch making contact with the blonde's teammate as opposed to the blonde himself. Midoriya was annoyed he missed. He watched the blonde in curiosity as he did something. He flexed a hand, sighing in mild disappointment with the results. A shame. I was certainly interested in trying out your quirk. Midoriya's head snapped up to his. Icy blue eyes met artificial green. The smug look was back, but it looked more forced this time. What kind of power? Hizashi felt the need to focus on this moment, with them, as opposed to literally anything else. Minoma Nito quirk? Copy. What's going on down there, Racer? Is Minoma trying to get a grasp of Portal? Huh. Copy. Copy what exactly? Power? Was that even possible? Apparently not, considering Minoma did still have his own hands. And legs. And eyes. Etc. Hatsum had clearly gotten bored of the fight, if you could even call it that. She kept getting distracted by the high-baller tech company representatives in the crowd. She pulled a new baby out of her backpack. It was one Midoriya had been waiting to experience in person. And that's what it was, an experience. She cranked a switch on the side of the rocket launcher, firing off before he could even blink. Monoma was stunned to silence. Midoriya wanted to laugh. Uraraka and Tokoyami's mouths dropped open. In fact, most people in the arena were suddenly paying attention. Time seemed to slow a bit as the recoil hit Hatsum. Monoma's team scrambled back to save their sorry asses from a literal bomb. The air guy poised to send off a few walls, but he just wasn't fast enough. A crack of a whip. And that's time up. The bomb went off. Midoriya cackled alongside Hatsum when Monoma went flying. Midoriya didn't feel bad. He wasn't even badly hurt. Uraraka helped Tokoyami down to his feet, petting Dark Shadow's head in praise. Midoriya smiled at his team. They smiled back. He looked around, seeing if he could catch Shinsu's eye wherever he was on the field. They had only crossed paths during the battle briefly, and not again after that. Midoriya saw Ida, hands on his hips, looking proud. After all, his team had managed to hold on to the 1 million for the whole match. Ida happened to glance their way, his expression faltering when he made eye contact with Midoriya. Todoroki was glaring at him openly. Midoriya was tired. He met his gaze head-on, making it very clear when he rolled his eyes and turned back to his team. If Todoroki wanted to be pissy about whatever, let him be. Midoriya could figure him out after lunch. Arie. In first place, we have Team Todoroki. In second place, we have Team Bakugo. In third place we have Team Tokoyami, and in fourth place we have Team Shinsu. Midoriya snorted. Of course Shinso would somehow place in the top 4 without ever having been focused on by the lovely announcers. He was sure they would make up for that in the last round. Hey, it was a good tactic. Shinso could not have rolled his eyes any more dramatically. Okay, let's pretend for a second that a fucking rocket launcher isn't way too extra for a sports festival. Why did you fire it right at the end? Hatsum shrugged, chugging an energy drink. Midoriya shoved her water bottle closer to her. Uraraka and Tsuyu giggled at the general silliness of the conversation. Tokoyami was pecking at an apple. Personally, I enjoyed the rocket launcher. Hatsum slammed her hand on the lunch table. Echich, suck it, bitch. Thank you, bird person. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, smiling. He noticed Ida entering the cafeteria, looking around the crowded room. He quickly nudged Uraraka before holding up a hand to catch his attention. The spectacled boy smiled, shifting his tray in his hands and making his way to their table. Shinso sat up when he saw him. Welcome home, cheater. Midoriya snorted into his fist. Ida, the poor guy, looked completely lost. I don't believe I cheated in anything. To what are you referring, Shinso? Midoriya knew Shinso didn't really like Todoroki much. He could see where this conversation was going. I'm referring to when you teamed up with Todoroki. Have the two of you ever spoken outside of, like, the USJ incident? Did you even talk then? Ida looked a little uncomfortable. I may not be close with him, but I wanted to prove I could win without relying on all of you. By buddying up with one of the most powerful guys in our class? Yeah, sounds legit. The tension had been gradually growing. Midoriya needed it to stop. Shinso, leave him alone. Ida, sit before he jumps across the table at you. Todoroki isn't a complete asshole. I was in the same area as him for the USJ incident. He was a bit cold, no pun intended, but he didn't come off as a bad person. We talked after as well. I thought he was just lonely, but today he was, like, different. Like a different person altogether. Did any of you notice? Ida tapped his chin pensively. To be honest, he was distracted during the cavalry battle. For starters, he was dead silent, but he repeatedly looked out at the audience. Midoriya latched onto the tidbit of information. He did? Do you know why? The taller boy took off and cleaned his glasses, sighing. I'm not sure, I'm afraid. I would guess that he was stressed. There must be a lot of pressure on him, being the number 2 hero's son, especially as a legacy here in UA. Endeavor was a student as well. Midoriya blinked. Endeavor is the number 2 hero? he was met with a myriad of blank stares. Huh. His sweat dropped. Well, I just assumed he was too brash for the role. I don't really follow pop culture. Or current events. Hatsum can vouch for me. She nodded, thankfully. That is true. He didn't know the UA Sports Festival was a televised event until, last month. YWS. Do you think there's more going on there? I find it hard to believe he would do a complete 180 like that from stress alone. Shinso rolled his eyes, shrugging. It's hard to say. It's not like he tries to talk to any of us. Maybe I should go talk to him. I don't know, maybe I did something and didn't realize. Or maybe he just needs someone to talk to. Why should you be the one that talks to him? Midoriya turned to the insomniac, an unreadable expression on his face. What? Shinso shrunk a little under his gaze. He sounded more defeated. Look, all I'm saying is, you shouldn't have to burden yourself by trying to help him. Sometimes people don't want help. Even if they need it. Even if they know they should take it. I know you're trying to be a good person, but people are selfish. You're allowed to be selfish? Midoriya pursed his lips. He gave one sharp nod, standing up from the table. I'm going to go find him. Uraraka gave him a thumbs up in encouragement. Tsuyu and Tokoyami shared a look. He walked away. Finding Todoroki, Midoriya found, was much more difficult than anticipated. For starters, he had absolutely no idea where he went. Hey Kaminari, did you see where Todoroki went after the cavalry battle? The yellow blonde tapped his chin. That would be a no, sorry. Why, are you okay? Oh yeah, I'm fine. I just had a question, I guess. Thanks anyway. Kaminari smiled, turning back to his conversation with Ishido and Shiro. Midoriya carried on, searching the nearby corridors and waiting rooms. Nothing. The image of Shinso crossed his mind, as he bitterly spoke about Todoroki. Midoriya understood where Shinso was coming from, but that didn't necessarily mean he was right. Some people don't want help, but maybe they need someone to offer it. Or maybe he was trying too hard with someone who just didn't care. Not to side with Shinso, but Todoroki hadn't exactly broken into song and dance after they shared in some conversations. But he also didn't tell Midoriya to fuck off, so, what? Why did he care so much? Why was he forcing himself to search for a boy who clearly didn't want to be found? Why was he reaching out for someone who had been nothing but an ass to him all day? He scowled and rolled his eyes. How many times would he have to reach out before he gave up? He was getting annoyed. How many places could a teenage boy hide in the stadium? Surely not that many. Unless he left. Midoriya followed the signs to the exit. He knew there were stalls and games set up outside, so probably not there. Plus, Todoroki didn't seem like the type to enjoy large crowds. An emergency exit maybe? It was worth a shot. He turned on his heel and jogged back in the other direction. He found the nearest fire exit, a large tunnel leading directly to the exterior of the stadium. Midoriya thought it was poor planning. What if someone broke in again? All they'd have to do is hide in the forest right next to the stadium and walk through the comically large tunnel directly to the students. But oh well, he wasn't one to critique. He walked through the tunnel, taking a deep breath of fresh air, feeling the gentle sun on his face. He let himself smile. The feeling really never got old. Midoriya? The boy exhaled, looking to his left. Who was sitting there, knees to his chest, but Todoroki. You're a tough guy to find. Why are you sitting here by yourself? The other boy stared at him for a beat too long. Midoriya got the impression he wasn't going to respond, until Todoroki sighed. I needed to breathe. I hear that. He felt his earlier irritation claw back up his throat. He turned to face the other boy properly. Why are you talking to me now? Did I do something to you? I don't understand how we went from being friends to you being mad at me. The heterochromatic boy's expression shifted. Midoriya sniffed, aggressively rubbing his nose. We were friends. That caught his attention. He blinked a few times, rubbing his neck. Well, I thought so. At the USJ and after. We were talking. I don't know, sorry. Todoroki looked pensive. Vaguely. His expressions were hard to read. In that case, I haven't been a very good friend. I don't have experience when it comes to having friends. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to behave. Midoriya pinched his brows. Behave? You don't have to do anything, Todoroki, just be you. I want to be your friend. He blinked once, slowly. Midoriya briefly pictured a cat. Why? He was not joking. Midoriya didn't know how to respond. I just think you're cool. You've got that wicked power and you manage to stay so calm and in control all the time. I envy that, you know? Plus, you were nice to me before. And I thought maybe you needed a friend. Todoroki looked away from him, a somewhat morose expression on his face. You pity me? Midoriya pinched his brows. What's there to pity? Todoroki, I want to be your friend, and I thought that because you're not very close with the class, it was because you were scared or something. Shy, maybe. The dual boy said nothing, so Midoriya continued. You always seem to float above it all, until the USJ. During the apprehension test, you stayed completely calm while Eraserhead scared everyone else shitless. During the hero and villain training, your team won the fastest because of your skill. Honestly, even during the USJ, you talked sense into me when I didn't want to hear it. And you didn't hesitate. You're just so, I don't know. Above everything. I don't know how else to put it. But that's just it though, isn't it? When you're so high above everything, when you're untouchable, it can be hard to connect with others, right? It's like, maybe you lost touch? Todoroki just watched him from where he was sitting. Midoriya kinda regretted not sitting down before he made the conversation heavy. He was honestly surprised Todoroki responded at all. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Todoroki. I can see why you thought that. Midoriya watched as he stared off into space. It wasn't clear what he was thinking, but he hoped it was at least positive. Todoroki looked up at him with a fresh determination in his eyes. It was a refreshing sight. If we are friends, can I share something with you? The green-haired boy nodded, walking over and sitting down cross-legged next to Todoroki. Go ahead, whatever you want. He hesitated, opening and closing his mouth. Have you ever heard of quirk marriages? Internally, Midoriya was laughing at the irony of him, literally the only person who knew absolute fuck all about quirks, being asked if he knew something. About quirks? What were the odds? Externally, he shook his head. No, I haven't. Todoroki sighed, looking away from him. Around the second and third generations of quirks, some people realized that they could manufacture stronger powers in their offspring. People's family would be paid off to marry complete strangers for the sole reason being to pump out powerful children. Midoriya didn't like where this was going. That sounds like eugenics? Todoroki huffed what might have been a laugh. In a lot of ways, it was. They were banned a few decades ago, but that didn't stop the rich people with agendas. Endeavor, my father, bought my mother's hand. My grandparents shipped her off to him, happy with the check filling their pockets. Midoriya assumed Todoroki wasn't exactly close with his extended family. He forced 4 children out of her, looking for one power. The one power? Midoriya didn't need to guess. Yours? Todoroki's gaze turned hard, making his chest hurt. Yes. He isolated me from my older siblings. He didn't want his failures contaminating his masterpiece. A legacy stronger than all might, that's all the bastard wants? He raised a hand to his left eye. The one with the very large, very noticeable scar. Midoriya felt sick to his stomach. My mother tried to protect me. There was only so much of him she could take, evidently. Todoroki. The other boy was breathing harder than he had been. Midoriya thought he wouldn't be able to stop if he wanted to. She said I looked just like him, that she couldn't stand the sight of me, and she threw boiling water in my face. He was staring. He knew he shouldn't be, but even he couldn't come up with anything to say to that. Endeavor shipped her off to a psychiatric care ward. He never talked about what happened after. I've been refusing part of myself, of my quirk, because of him. I don't want to give him the satisfaction. Midoriya couldn't let that slide. Todoroki, I don't want to offend you at all, but your dad is a bitch. The reaction he got was worth the possibility of anger. Todoroki blinked at him like he didn't know how to respond, before a small smile settled on his face. You've been suppressing your quirk? Part of it is fire. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Okay, you don't have to take my word for it, But I'm pretty sure you aren't Endeavor. Just because you're related to him doesn't mean you have to consider him your family. Or that you let him have such a big influence on you actions? Todoroki gave him a weird look. What do you mean? Well, what good is not using your power going to be in the future? Thieves and murderers aren't going to care that you have a bad past. Civilians won't care as long as you can help them. Why keep letting him influence you when you could use all your power and still not give him what he wants? Would that not be more satisfying and safe for you? He gave him another strange look, but this time there was a layer of understanding underneath. Thank you, Midoriya. You've given me a lot to think about. To be honest, this morning, I told you I was going to beat you to prove something to him. That if I could take you down with only half of my power, that I could beat All Might as well. And that I could make him watch me reject him. But that's still letting him occupy my thoughts. All I want is to be free of him. You're right. So, thank you. Midoriya smiled. Of course. Todoroki turned to face him again. May I ask you a question? Sure. Are you somehow related to Midnight? She seems too young to be your mother, your aunt or sister maybe. And what about Aizawa? I know you're trying to hide it, but it's clear you have a connection of some kind. Midoriya choked several times during that spiel. I mean, no, I'm not related to Midnight, she just likes me. And, I guess since you already know and you trusted me just now, yeah. I do have a connection to Eraserhead. He kind of adopted me? I don't know. He's my guardian. Todoroki blinked once and nodded sharply. I will keep your secret. Midoriya smiled, amused at his serious tone. If only he knew about the rest of his secrets. Thanks, Todoroki. The boy hesitated again, slowly holding out his left arm and cupping his hand. A gentle, warming flame appeared in the palm of his hand. Midoriya watched it in wonder. Todoroki looked uneasy, but the flame stayed burning, so maybe he just had to get comfortable with it again. Thank you. He grinned. Shigaraki was tapping his index finger repeatedly on the bar. The eye not covered by father was glued to the TV screen. He didn't get it. How could that NPC have gotten to the final round without showing his quirk? There was no way he was quirkless. What little he could see of his arms down to his fingers were stark white. So what? Was he just not going to use it? Kurogiri watched as he tapped. The man had given him grief for destroying so many glasses. He knew he'd never hear the end of it if he ruined the whole counter. The small monitor behind him was whirring. Sensei? The voice of his master crackled and fizzled through the old speakers. Yes, Tamura? He kept staring at the TV. They were doing that asinine section where the contestants not good enough to make it to the end had the chance to play some games. And show off their quirks. He felt the cogs turning in his head. The green one, I want information on him. The same with the blonde and the purple-haired one. A deep, resounding chuckle came from the small screen. As you wish, Tamura. What is it about these three? He growled in frustration. These NPCs are overpowered. The green one cheated, and he hasn't even shown his quirk properly today. It's so. How did he survive the Nomu? Calm yourself. You know quirks have only gotten stronger through the generations. Your own, for example? The boy, barely an adult, huffed. The blonde one with explosions. He's angry. I think he has potential. Maybe even enough to be worthy of joining up with us. The monitor buzzed. What makes you say that? He keeps getting caught up in the games, but you can see when he snaps back to reality. I think he's fighting his natural impulses. Ah, a clockwork orange, so to speak. Very astute of you, Tamura. I'm impressed. He shrunk a bit under the meager praise. Sensei wasn't one to hand out compliments. His terrifying control over most of the underground left him hardened. Plenty had failed to meet his expectations, and let's just say they didn't expect a second chance. His sensei spoke again. The last one, what is it about him? From what I can see, he can control people. I'm not sure how, but if that's his genuine quirk, he could be a serious asset. That is, if he can prove himself to be more than an NPC. Sensei hummed. I see. So the last two are of importance, should we sway them to our side, while the first is of special interest to you. I'll see what can be found on them. Kurogiri watched him as he faced the screen. Thank you, Sensei. Midoriya had managed to convince Todoroki to join his friends for what was left of their lunch hour, though their initial greetings could have gone better. Much better. Midoriya knew that Shinso was bitter about a lot of things. It was kind of a part of his personality at this point. But still, he really hoped the other would have been semi-amiable toward Todoroki. Unfortunately not. Oh, I see you found him. And why, pray tell, did you bring him here? He shot Shinso a look, but the other ignored him. The rest, at least, welcomed him. Todoroki, wonderful to see you've joined us. I must say, your strategizing in the last round was both practical and effective. Well done. Hey Todoroki. It's nice to see you. Are you hungry? Yeah, Karo, you really gave us a run for our money. Speaking of money, if you let me make you some gear, we both could make a lot of money. Nice work on coming first twice in a row. You've been granted immense power, and your control is striking. The dark welcomes you should you choose to explore it. Todoroki was definitely not prepared for all the attention to be on him. He especially was caught off guard by Tokoyami's comment. Midoriya shoved him into the seat next to him before sitting down himself. He cleared his throat to alleviate some of the awkwardness he could feel growing. So, how are we feeling about the final challenge? Shinso raised an eyebrow. I'm against Monoma in the 4th round. The freaky guy who insulted our whole class. Luckily for me, I'm dipping. Todoroki looked up at that. You're forfeiting the match? Shinso looked up at him from under his eyebrows. No, I'm going to walk onto the platform, wait until the match starts, and walk back off. The bicolored boy stared. Why? Shinso scoffed into his onigiri. It might not make sense to you, but I'm not here to make a show. I got to the last round, that's all I wanted to prove. I already have my internship lined up. You don't want to win? This time he gave him a weird look. No? It doesn't matter to me. By next week, no one will be talking about it. Why put all your energy into a competition that doesn't even matter after today? Todoroki looked away, a curious expression on his face. Midoriya blinked at Shinso, who shrugged back. Ida cleared his throat. Who are you? Fighting first, Midoriya? He froze. I don't know. Uraraka and Tsuyu laughed at him. He huffed into his bento. What? I didn't check. Hatsum stopped stuffing her face with cup noodles, swallowing a massive mouthful in one large gulp. No need to worry, my simple-minded friend, for you have been placed against me. Simple-minded? Why is everyone being mean to me today? Todoroki slouched a bit. Okay, maybe not the best choice of words. Whatever, what did you have in mind, best friend whom I admire and respect very much? Tokoyami snorted that time. No need to fear my guy, trust me when I say I have the best plan ever. And we're going first, so all eyes will be on us. This literally could not have gone better for me. Oh, you have my interest now. What are you scheming? Ida chopped his arm. Midoriya, it is disrespectful to assume your dear friend would have ulterior motives during the renowned sports festival. Hatsum raised an eyebrow. Oh, I absolutely have ulterior motives. I want to get people talking about my babies. How better to do that than to have Greenie using my gear as well? I already did out the paperwork, and Power Loader said it was fine as long as nothing blew up, unintentionally obviously. Ida dropped his arm. Uraraka smiled at him sympathetically. Midoriya grinned. Perfect, now, how chaotic do we get with this? What tech are you thinking? She tapped her chin a few times. Let me think. Midoriya, may I speak with you privately? It will only be for a moment. Shoyuda had appeared behind them at some point. Both Midoriya and Shinso startled. Oh, sure, I'll be back in a second, guys. Shinso, play nice. Shinso glared at him as he followed Shoyuda away from the table and out of the cafeteria. So, how are you feeling? Still overwhelmed? He smiled. Well, yeah, but I'm doing okay. You sound like you're having fun with the commentary. How'd he rope you into that one? The man sighed, leaning against the wall. Lost a bet. Turns out, Hizashi is really good at guessing which third years like each other. Midoriya hummed. We didn't see much of you during the race. Saving energy for something? No, I just didn't want to give away my strategies too soon. I'm not even that pushed about winning, I'm just curious to see how this round goes. You'll do fine. We did plenty of combat training before UA. Is that still knocking around in your noggin? He chuckled as Shoyuta tapped his head. Yeah, I don't know. I find it hard to switch from the portal mentality. I was mostly all about movement and dodging before, you know? I keep hesitating. Maybe I need to work on that. Shoyuta gave him a look. Yes, I would argue that that is something worth working on. Any ideas for your internship yet? Well, given that I know all of about 10 pro heroes in total, I'll probably play it safe. And you're positive you don't want to intern with either of us? Midoriya nodded. He knew, logically, that he absolutely could just intern with either of his parental figures, easy. But he wanted to earn his internship. Or, at least go to someone who could teach him something new. Kiyama was a no, for now anyway. She couldn't really help him with his power or his fighting, with her own fighting style being so different to his. Nedzu was an absolute no. He didn't feel anywhere near confident enough to spend a whole week with the principal. Sure, they'd spoken over tea a few times, but the mouse/bear/whatever was always asking questions about the past. Plus, he wasn't sure if he was prepared to have his first therapy session be unintentionally hosted by Nedzu. Maybe some of the other staff? He didn't know the rest of them that well, so he could happily accept an offer from any of them. Another bonus would be that they know his guardians personally. It would be easy to talk to them should anything happen. He shrugged after a second. Yeah, thanks though. It really means a lot that you'd keep training me. Shoyuta smiled under his capture weapon. Yeah, whatever. Get back to your friends, lunch is over soon. They went their separate ways. Hey hi. Welcome back to the final round of the sports festival. During the break, our students got to relax and play some games, but now we're back in business. First up, Midoriya Izuku from the hero course versus Hatsum Mei from the support course. They were on the same team in the last round. Let's see how this goes. Hold on. What's Midoriya got there? Is that I believe it is Hatsum's tech? She filled out the paperwork. Calm down. Oh, this is going to be a good one. I can feel it. Midnight cracked her whip as both Hatsum and Midoriya took their positions on the platform. The crowd was cheering like crazy. Midoriya didn't know how to feel. He felt warm, kind of. It was an interesting sensation, having people so genuinely happy to witness one's performance. It was certainly a nice change of pace from GLaDOS. He took a deep breath, thinking back over their plan. Let it happen as it happened. She knew what she was doing. All right, when I crack my whip, you will try to incapacitate your opponent, knock them out of bounds, or get them to concede defeat. Matches will be timed, but this won't affect your score in any way. Cementos and I are here if things get out of hand. And remember, in order to win a medal, you have to give your all. She raised her arm dramatically. Ready? And dash. The sound of her whip echoed through his eardrums. He knew the plan. He took off forward, as if he was going to try shoving Hatsum out. Right, and he neared her, he reached out and she flew upwards on metal poles, extending from her backpack. He skidded to a stop. Step 1, complete. She smiled, pulling out the megaphone from earlier. As you can see, this backpack comes fully stocked with sensors and my patented, fast-reacting balancing system. No matter the terrain or the weather conditions, this baby will keep you out of reach. Midoriya ran at her again, smiling wider this time. Her tech shot her out of the way again, only this time Midoriya made to spin around mid-stride. His poorly executed turn was corrected by the tech she lent him, sending him back on course. What you just witnessed is my finest creation to date. This baby automatically rebalances you in your stride, both boosting and improving your speed. No more unfortunate falls or slow starts. This baby has you covered. That whole thing went on for a number of minutes. It, being the first match of many, had the audience high in anticipation. Really, it couldn't have gone better for Hatsum. What especially helped was that both Shoyuta and Hizashi caught on to what she was doing pretty quickly, going as far to audibly react when one of her babies did something particularly striking. Once she'd shown off what she wanted to, she proudly waved to the crowd and walked herself out of bounds. Midoriya laughed and applauded as she left, heading back through the tunnel. It was funny, honestly, that they let her get away with it. Maybe it was because she was the only student not from the hero course to make it to the final round. Either way, the crowd was impressed with her. He was through to the next round, and Todoroki was being nicer to him. All in all, he was having a really good time. He was walking back through the halls, thinking about his next match. He'd be fighting whoever won the second round. He was curious to know who that would be. He turned the corner and was met with an absolute brick wall of a man. Oh, fuck my life. The man turned around. His face was adorned with the most ridiculous fiery facial hair, and a face that only a mother could love. Endeavor, the number 2 hero. Todoroki's shitbag of a father. You came third in the first round without drawing any attention to yourself. You'll be against my masterpiece in the next round. You better give him a good fight. The man started turning back around. Midoriya refused to let Todoroki be spoken about like an object. He also refused to let this flaming asshole give him grief. Wow, you kiss your mother with that mouth? Endeavor froze, looking back at him. Excuse me? You're excused now. I believe only students are allowed to be back here. Care to run along back to your seat, sir? His smile was absolutely venomous. The hero didn't enjoy being told off. Surprise, surprise. How dare you speak to me like that? Don't you know to respect authority? Midoriya blinked, putting on a very sweet, very fake smile. I'm sorry, do I know you? He furrowed his brows. I also don't appreciate that tone of yours. Leave before I make you leave. Midoriya put a hand on his chest, gasping. Excuse me? Did you just threaten a minor on school grounds? I'd hate to have to pull the camera footage from this hall. I'm sure your fans would be curious to know why you might be banned from UA, despite being an alumnus. Run along back to the viewing area, please. You're stinking up the hall with those flames. Midoriya walked around him, shooting him a glare as he walked past. By the way, Todoroki isn't an object, sir. He also, more importantly, isn't you. Get your head out of your ass. Midoriya left before he got a response. If he was being honest, Midoriya wasn't all that interested in watching the fights. Something didn't sit right with him about watching his friends and classmates fight each other for others' entertainment and business dealings. They fought like they had nothing to lose. For some of them, he thought it had to be true. What he didn't like was that it was being broadcasted for all to see. Why was something like that allowed? Surely Nezu would know better than to show off the powers and abilities of the future generations of heroes? He sighed. Hatsum didn't seem to care. She used it as an opportunity. As she should, but still. She was comfortable in what was happening. So were most of his classmates too. He was paranoid, obviously. All too used to being watched while trying to perform at his best. Maybe it was because GLaDOS observed him so keenly and borderline obsessively that he had a problem with the festival. Shinso had the right idea. This was hardly going to be the only opportunity for them to catch the public's eye. He shouldn't have to pull out all the stops at the first chance. Better to leave some things secret. Add a little spice later on. He sighed, picking up the pace as he walked back to his seat. He didn't want to watch his classmates fight, but he might as well send them off with well wishes. Who knows, perhaps it means more to them than it does to him. He frowned. Turning the corner, he jogged up the stairs, trying to clear his mind, only to bump into Todoroki. He heard something clatter to the ground. Oh, hey, sorry about that. Midoriya noticed that the other boy looked relieved to have found him. It's okay. Can I ask you something before I go out there? He blinked, smiling. Of course. Is everything okay? Todoroki's face was, to put it lightly, torn. The conflict he was so openly expressing threw Midoriya off. He raised a hand, trying to comfort his friend? Friend. Todoroki closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them, Midoriya could have choked. He had an intense look about him, the likes of which Midoriya had rarely experienced. Were you serious? About everything you were saying earlier? But Midoriya wanted to punch everyone who'd ever hurt the boy in front of him. Of course. I meant every word. He took another drawn-out breath. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to give me your honest answer. I want to do something stupid. Really, really stupid. It could have serious consequences for me, but I really want to do it. I want to. For me. Should I go for it? Midoriya could feel himself smiling awkwardly. This was not what he was expecting. Well, I wouldn't recommend doing anything illegal dash. Todoroki's eyes went wide. No. Nothing like that. He sighed a breath of relief, dramatically wiping his forehead. Oh, thanks science, I thought I was about to become an accomplice in something, holy shit. The bicolored boy had the ghost of a smile. I think, if it's something you want to do for yourself, even if there are consequences, you should do it. Unless it's murder. That is negotiable if the target is a dick, though. Anyways, sorry? Yeah, I'd say. If it'll make you happy, do it. Will you regret it if you don't? Todoroki's smile widened, though his eyes were full of an emotion that Midoriya couldn't even begin to identify. Maybe that's why he needed a therapist. Definitely. More than anything. Midoriya smiled. Do it. Show them who's boss, right? Right? Todoroki glanced at a clock hanging along the wall of the corridor. Midoriya figured he should head back to his seat. Hey, good luck with the match, you've got serious strength, man. Show them what you've got. Todoroki looked at him, amused. He nodded, and started walking past him, leaning to pick up whatever had fallen from his grasp. Thank you, but it won't be necessary. Midoriya turned, watching his friend strolling away, the most at ease he'd ever seen him. With a fucking megaphone in his hand. What the fuck does that mean? He shook his head, chuckling. Whatever, let the cards fall as they may. He stuck his hands in his pockets and headed for the students' seating. Uraraka had been nice enough to save him a seat between her and Ida. She'd waved him over when he got there, nudging Shinso beside her. Shinso looked at him, nodded his head slightly, and went back to talking to whoever was sitting on the other side of him. Once Midoriya had sat down comfortably, he realized the person was Monoma. He was surprised, to say the least. Especially considering the fact that Shinso had been rattled by the blonde's insults following the USJ. And that Monoma was a little cracked, mentally speaking. Maybe that was just his inferiority complex. Whatever. He leaned forward in his seat, waving at him. Monoma stalled in his conversation with Shinso. Hey, how are you doing on this fine day? He raised a blonde eyebrow. I don't understand you 1A people. I'm fine. Do you mind? We were clearly having a conversation. Midoriya shrugged. Shinso elbowed Monoma in the hip. Shinso didn't exactly love the fact that the random draw had pitted him and Monoma against each other. Them, two of the few hero students who'd been badly mistreated for their quirks. He himself had been labeled as a villain the second people found out about his quirk. Surprise, surprise, people don't tend to enjoy losing all control of their bodies. School had always been weird. Weird people asking him weird questions about his weird quirk. Creepy things, like if he'd make people do things they'd be uncomfortable with. Or just disgusting things. Shinso was many things, but he wasn't a shitbag. He absolutely wanted to show his ex-classmates up, becoming the best hero alive and rubbing it in their disgusting, judgmental faces. But the spotlight wasn't for him. He wasn't that kind of person, he didn't want to be that kind of hero. Underground, he'd decided. That's where he belonged. But the unfortunate truth was that he was still viewed as the bad guy. Other than in UA. It was so foreign to him at first, being treated with kindness and friendliness right off the bat, and even after he used his quirk. True, he still hadn't fully explained what he could do, but his classmates didn't care. And Midoriya had helped him. A few times. He was the best friend he ever had. The only best friend he ever had. And Midoriya had helped him make new friends. And he was happier. Monoma, not so much. Technically, he wasn't even supposed to be in the final round, but two of Shinsu's lovely teammates from the cavalry battle didn't feel like they'd earned their spots, so they both dropped out. Midnight was nice enough to let his team, the fifth placers, choose two to participate. His quirk was functionally useless on its own, and while that didn't mean it was weak, it meant he would forever be relying on other people being there. Obviously the guy had issues. Midoriya was probably right in thinking he had an inferiority complex of some kind. Shinso had honestly been really shocked that the other approached him before their match. Would you look at that, making the two freaks fight in the first round? What are the odds? Initially, Shinso assumed he had just wanted to throw him off his game. Look, if you're here to try pissing me off, it isn't going to work. Look, not everything is about you. I want to ask you about our match. Shinso raised his eyebrows. Shoot. Monoma sighed. How much does this mean to you? That was what flicked the switch in his head. Monoma, of all people, wanting to know if losing would fuck up his mental health or something. He snorted sardonically. It doesn't. I did what I wanted to do. So, I'm done. Enjoy the next heat. The look Monoma had on his face was amazing. He was thriving. In that moment, Shinso knew he had peaked. You're dropping out? Why the hell is that what you want? Why don't you want to win? He just shrugged, relaxed and pleased with himself. I don't need to win to be satisfied. I got into the hero course, and it's been a dream. It's all I wanted as a kid. I'm going to be a hero, the kind I want to be. I got this far on my own strength with help from friends. Winning would be cool, yeah, but I don't need it. I'm happy with where I am. Todoroki, who had been sitting in the row behind them, got up and left after that. Monoma scratched at his hair. He exhaled sharply. Of course you're being noble or whatever. I'm surprised you didn't just make them give you the damn medal. He rolled his eyes at that. Yeah? Well, it's been nice, kindly fuck off. No, let me finish, please. You don't want to win, good for you. Thanks for the pass, if that's what you want to hear. When are you planning on forfeiting? Shinso actually laughed at that. Forfeiting? Nah, I was thinking of having some fun with it, if you're on board. Monoma smirked. Oh, what did you have in mind? Shinso had an idea all right. While he and Monoma had established a begrudging respect based on their own experiences and their hatred of the Hero Commission, Shinso wouldn't tolerate him being a dick to his best friend, who had literally just sat down. So he elbowed him in the hip to shut him up. He certainly hadn't been expecting it, but that probably served better, in his opinion. Midoriya looked between them in confusion, but he smiled to himself and looked away. Weird. Shinso looked down at the arena, watching Todoroki and Shiro make their ways onto the platform. He didn't know how he felt about Todoroki. On one hand, he was born with an absolutely unparalleled quirk, in terms of power and abilities. His control of said quirk was insane. Shinso wasn't blind. He froze a whole building for an exercise, and managed to leave the attached buildings completely untouched and undamaged. He captured all the villains around him in the USJ, escaping without a scratch. He'd certainly done more than Shinso. He rolled his eyes at the thought. What Shinso didn't like was that he was so privileged. He had a rich family, a direct connection to the number 2 hero, and the respect of everyone in UA for just being a legacy. He never seemed grateful for anything he had. On the other hand, the number 2 hero was a flaming asshole. Shinso did not trust his parenting abilities in the slightest. Todoroki clearly was not the same as the rest of their classmates, socially speaking. He almost never initiated conversation, and he was so unaware of others' feelings that it was borderline crazy. If those weren't red flags, he didn't know what were. Of course, he had absolutely no proof for anything he could think up. And it was easier to be an ass than it was to try befriend someone who didn't want it. Todoroki had literally said that he wasn't there to make friends. There isn't a lot of ways to interpret that. What he couldn't let go of, though, was that Todoroki singled out Midoriya. Posed a challenge for him, wanting to beat him specifically. What about everyone else, huh? All Shinso would have to do is get him to talk, and he'd be done for. What good would ice be if Yaoyorozu created some antifreeze? Or a flamethrower? He didn't see them as threats, is what he was getting at. And he couldn't let that slide. Midoriya wanted to be nice. He wanted to try with him. Shinso didn't get it. He could also tell Midoriya wanted him to be nicer to Todoroki at lunch. And to give credit where credit was due, the bicolored boy had been different. Whatever Midoriya had said to him clearly had some impact. Though Shinso needed something from Todoroki. He needed the boy to earn his respect. Maybe that wasn't the fairest thing to do, but Todoroki had been an ass to his friends. He thought he was right to want more from him. Speaking of Todoroki, the boy was holding something. He couldn't quite tell what it was from where they were sitting, but he wondered how he had gotten permission to bring an extra something to his fight. Not like he needed help with that quirk. Midnight cracked her whip, controlling the crowd in an instant. All right. Next up, Todoroki the powerhouse versus the agile Shiro. How will I TP her? What's happening down there? Shinso looked back down at the arena. Todoroki was on fire. Well, not entirely. Half fire and half ice. It was the first time he ever saw the boy use it. Had he intentionally not been using fire? Half his quirk, and he still thought he was better than the rest of their class? Figures. Midoriya shot up from his seat, cheering at the top of his lungs, and for a moment, Shinso saw the flames grow. Shiro was looking a little nervous. Why was Midoriya so happy? Why was he so willing to reach out to people who didn't deserve it? He huffed, frustrated. He needed to stop projecting onto Todoroki immediately. Midnight was about to crack her whip to start the match. Todoroki held the thing he brought in his left hand. Hatsum cackled in the seat behind him. Ah, my design, my megaphone, being shown off to the world in the hands of a pro hero's son, today has been an absolute dream come true. A megaphone? Shinso narrowed his eyes. Todoroki held it up to his mouth. What was he planning? He took a deep breath. Shinso leaned further forward in his seat. Excuse me. Midnight froze. His voice bounced and echoed around the arena. Todoroki flinched at the volume. He tried again. Sorry, it was louder than I expected. Some laughter came from the audience, but people were watching so avidly, they never took their eyes off of him. I just had a wonderful conversation with a friend. My friend. And I would like to withdraw from the festival. Thank you. What the fuck? Midoriya was smirking at him. Shinso absolutely lost it. Oh no fucking way, that bitch stole my thing. Todoroki let the ice and fire disappear in an instant. He dropped the microphone in front of him, turned, and walked out of the arena. The audience were the loudest they'd been all day. Present Mike was screaming and Midoriya was laughing his head off. Goddamn, it was hard not to enjoy that. He really wanted to be original in dropping out, but fuck it. That was so cool. Midnight was looking up at the commentator's box, shrugging. Shiro looked a little disappointed, but he gave a big thumbs up before spinning on his heel. Monoma had a weird look on his face. Fucking hell, I mean? Good for him, right? The blonde gave him a hard stare for a moment. He turned away and nodded. Todoroki felt alive. Regardless of what Endeavor said, regardless of whatever punishment he received, he was so happy with himself. He practically sprinted through the halls, back to the students' viewing area. Midoriya was grinning so wide, Todoroki thought his face would split in two. That, holy shit, was amazing. You looked so menacing, the ice and fire, but no, boom, withdrawing. Insanely cool, I am so glad you did that. Midoriya scooped him up in a massive hug. Affection was foreign to him, especially as he got older, but it was nice. He gently wrapped his arms around his friend. He hid a smile. He could have had this from the start, he realized. If he hadn't been so insistent on rejecting his father's wishes. If he hadn't denied any and all offers of friendship from people who genuinely cared. But, better late than never, right? It took a good 10 minutes for Midoriya to properly calm down after that. He was just so thrilled for Todoroki. He knew it was weird for him to be this excited over something as simple as forfeiting, but it meant something to Todoroki, so naturally he was pleased. Also, Todoroki called him his friend. He mentally fist-pumped. When he and Todoroki sat down, Uraraka left to get in some last-minute preparation, so it was just him, Todoroki and Shinso. And Monoma, but he wasn't very present in their impromptu staring contest. More specifically, between Shinso and Todoroki. Midoriya was almost certain that Todoroki knew Shinso wasn't his biggest fan, but hopefully. Something? He sighed. He just wanted his friends to get along. Surprisingly, Shinso turned away, breaking their eye contact. Why did you do that? Seriously, I'm asking. Todoroki looked at Midoriya briefly, who was the unfortunate soul stuck sitting between them. I was thinking about what you said. About how you didn't need to win to be content with yourself. And I talked to a friend about something serious I need to work on. I guess I just wanted to. Is that a problem? Shinso snorted, but Midoriya knew him well enough to know it wasn't sarcastic. Not a problem, I was hoping I'd be the only one, though. Todoroki glanced at Midoriya before smiling softly. Monoma leaned around Shinso, interrupting their moment of newfound respect. As touching as this is, can we turn our attention back to the games? Who's up next? Kaminari and Ishido. My money's on Ishido all the way. Shinso was correct in his bet. Ishido wiped out Kaminari before he could charge up his attack. Turns out, a sudden blast of even mild acid can scare someone enough to sprint away. So yeah, end of that match. Ida clapped Midoriya on the shoulder as he got up. I'm up soon. I'd like to wait in advance, so I'll see you all after my match. Good luck, Ida. Who are you up against? Ida stood up tall. Thank you, I am against Tsubaraba, from Class B. I believe he was on Minoma's team for the Cavarli battle. With that he left. If Midoriya was being completely 100% honest, he was not paying attention to the fights. He had very little interest, aside from the occasional entertaining moment, like when Kaminari's tracksuit pants turned into shorts. Ha acid. Shinso and Minoma were up, and Midoriya was curious. He knew his friend didn't want to participate in this round, but there were any number of ways he could forfeit. Or Minoma could try to beat him anyway. He watched as they, like all others before them, walked up the steps to the platform, glaring at each other hauntingly. He was both curious and spooked. They stalled in front of Midnight, only about 5 feet from each other. She cracked her whip, and the audience went quiet in focus. 2 wild cards forced to fight. The headline wrote itself, really. Midoriya clued back into the match when he heard Hatsum cackle behind him. They were shaking their fists? He leaned forward. Shinso and Minoma stood in the same places, holding their right hands out. Rock, paper, scissors, go. Midoriya knew that Shinso had practiced voice projection, for his quirk, but he didn't know he was that good at it. He found himself laughing along with Hatsum, as they furiously threw out the same answer 3 times in a row. Paper. Scissors. They got more dramatic the longer they went on, and by the 3rd round, they were both gasping at the result. Finally, they went for it one last time, shouting at the top of their lungs. Rock, paper, scissors. Minoma went for rock. Shinso went for scissors. The blonde threw up his arms, cheering. The audience, though confused, cheered along with him. Shinso shrugged, nodded, and walked himself out of bounds. Damn. Midoriya both was and was not expecting them to orchestrate something so weird, but he was glad they did. Shake things up a bit. He glanced at Todoroki beside him, who was hiding his quiet laughter. Ida was up and unsurprisingly won. He managed to dash around and push his opponent out of bounds as fast as the eye could see. He was very proud of himself, Midoriya realized when he got back to his seat. Why yes. I know full well that many of our talented classmates didn't manage to make it this far, so I'm glad I got here. My brother said he'd try to watch my fights today. I want to make him proud. Oops, he'd been thinking aloud. Oh, that's cool. It must be nice, having his support. Ida nodded, adjusting his glasses. Indeed, he supported my dreams of heroism since I was a child. He is an incredible hero, and I want to live up to him. I hope he was able to watch. Midoriya patted him on the back. Hey, you're still in the games, even if he missed your first match, he could tune in for the rest of them. Ida brightened up a bit. Yes, I'm sure you're right. Thank you, Midoriya. He and Midoriya half-watched the next fight, Aoyama against Kirishima. No offense to Aoyama, but it was an unfortunate pairing, and Midoriya had a hard time believing he'd be able to beat the brick house that was Kirishima. Let's be real, the boy was jacked. A few well-placed punches were all it took, before the redhead literally held Aoyama over his shoulder and threw him out of bounds. Yaoyorozu hid her eyes with her forearm as she left the arena. She was so humiliated. Tokoyami was an incredibly strong opponent, but she completely froze. She didn't even care if she won or lost, not really. But she wanted to prove to herself that she was deserving of her grades and her friends' high opinions of her. She had been coached in using her quirk since it manifested. She'd had access to the best quirk specialists, best teachers, and best doctors in the country. Don't get her wrong, she was fully aware that she was born into wealth. She knew she had more privileges than some of her classmates. She also knew that her parents wanted her to do well in life, to the point where they practically pumped money into any company or organization they thought could help her. Her quirk requires a comprehensive understanding of chemistry. They hired some of the highest acclaimed tutors on the globe. She had trouble maintaining a healthy weight because her quirk requires her body fat to function. They hired nutritionists upon nutritionists to find a regime that worked for her. She had trouble making friends as a child. They set up playdates with their employees' children and signed her up for clubs and activities. She wanted, more than anything, to prove herself worthy of their investment in her. And she blew it. Their match had been highly anticipated and ended so quick it made her head spin. She'd barely created a shield before Dark Shadow completely flung her out of bounds. Her friends still cheered for her, but she missed her chance. Probably her only chance. She wished she could be as nonchalant about the sports festival as Todoroki was. Out of everyone in one, she thought Todoroki and Ito would understand the pressure she felt the most, both of them coming from similar backgrounds to her. Only, Todoroki dropped out, and she overheard Ito speaking to his friends. He barely sounded rattled. Unbothered. Just looking to impress his brother, and nothing else. Was it just her? What would her parents say, now that she hadn't even made it to the semi-finals? She sighed, scrubbing her eyes again. She had been given an opportunity, a beautiful and powerful quirk. And Yaoyorozu felt she didn't even know how to use it. Maybe she needed a solid internship after the festival, but who's to say she'll even get a good offer? After that performance? She tried to calm down before she ventured back to the student seating. The last thing she wanted was their pity. Only when she walked out, making her way to an open seat, Midoriya and his friends were happy to see her. Whoa, Yaoyorozu. I forgot how insane your power is. Tokoyami was already sitting with them. She felt bubbling, uncomfortable embarrassment crawl up her neck as they looked at one another. Yaoyorozu, you were a fearsome opponent. I'm continually impressed with your quirk as well. She felt bad for being awkward. Tokoyami was so nice, of course he wouldn't be rude about winning. Midoriya's pink-haired friend, Hatsum, shushed them with her whole hands, leaning across them to get her attention. Excuse me, your quirk is unbelievable. Would you mind stopping by the support labs sometime? I could use some materials the school would definitely not pay for. In return, I could amp up your costume or something. Midoriya tugged her hand from his mouth. Wow, since when do you have manners? Since always, you're just a little bitch. Yaoyorozu covered her mouth. Midoriya narrowed his eyes at Hatsum. Says you. Whatever, Yaoyorozu. My dude, you have some crazy abilities. Maybe make a gun. I feel like it would catch people off guard. Hatsum's eyes went wide. Oh, that's a fantastic idea. How about this? You make me some materials and I can give you some blueprints for weapons. Nothing too hard to control right away. I noticed you use lots of batons and shields. While those are solid, they're primitive. Imagine the upgrades. Built-in tasers, extra protection, maybe some shock absorbers. Plus, it'll be quick to create. Bigger things take you longer, according to your file, so lots of small, powerful tools is exactly what you need. Oh, I can see them already. Why am I still here? I have blueprints to draw up. Yaoyorozu was overwhelmed. Hatsum had some ideas. Some very, very rational ideas. Perhaps Midoriya was right too. Small, powerful weapons. She could manage that. Hatsum pulled out a sketchbook, dragging her pencil around furiously. Yaoyorozu smiled. A big, real smile. It felt nice. Uraraka was panicking. That might be exaggerating, but the point stood. Of all the people she could have been paired against for her first fight in the sports festival, it had to be Bakugo. She had no idea what to make of him. He'd always been a bit weird in class. He was quiet most of the time, which was kind of strange in comparison to him during heroics class. And the USJ. One incident in particular was the hero and villain training exercise. She could only assume he and Midoriya had some kind of history. One doesn't just have it out for another person without reason, surely. Midoriya had sounded so shocked? Confused, maybe, when he'd finally responded to her. Uraraka had watched the tapes back. She knew what Bakugo had done. But she also knew he voluntarily disqualified himself a second later. So, what was going on there? At the USJ, his explosions rang out around the whole complex. She felt the aftershock shaking through the ground into her bones. She'd heard from Kirishima, that he'd held off the villain's teleporter, as in their escape route, in the face of their leader. And their Nomo. Scary stuff. Kirishima seemed to be one of the few people Bakugo could tolerate for long periods of time. Sometimes Midoriya, but it changed day to day. She assumed the blonde had issues. She didn't want to be rude in thinking that, but the more she looked the more she saw. He avoided questions about his middle school. He avoided questions about his friends. He rarely met up with their classmates outside of school, especially in larger groups. He and Midoriya had some previous knowledge of each other before they joined UA. Bakugo rarely initiated conversation between them though, it was always Midoriya. She noticed, on some of his quieter days, he'd shrink at the sight of the green-haired boy. She sighed, leaning heavily on the table in the waiting room. Thinking too hard would frustrate her, she knew that. She needed to strategize. Glancing up at the TV, she knew she'd be up soon. Explosions are powerful. Uraraka knew that from experience. If she was going to beat him, it would take more than just anti-gravity. She'd been working on her stamina, trying not to be as nauseous using her quirk. She had the beginnings of a plan. Barely anything really. But maybe that would work in her favor. One thing she knew about Bakugo, he was a very methodical person. He planned out every attack based on other people's strategies. So, if she had no plan, maybe she could throw him off his game by being unpredictable. She knew it was a long shot, but it was the best plan she had. Uraraka Ochako and Bakugo Katsuki to the arena now, please. Her heart was thumping loudly in her chest. She took a deep, deep breath. Come on, Atago. Focus. My family, I'm doing this for them. She patted her cheeks a few times. Letting out a long exhale, she stood up and left the room. Walking up the steps of the platform made the situation feel a lot more real. Bakugo was staring her down from the other side of the arena. He had an intense glare, but she stood her ground. Midnight was looking between them with excitement. She clearly was enjoying her job. Although, she was sure anyone would love to be this up close and personal with the UA Sports Festival. Ticket prices were always really high, both due to the limited amount and the demand. She hoped to buy her parents tickets to the sports festival. Maybe in their third year. Present mixed commentary had been fun before, but knowing all his attention was on them made her nervous. He had been narrating all the other fights. Who's to say he wouldn't inadvertently give away any of her attacks? Knowing Aizawa, her teacher, would also be watching them made her knees weak. The last thing she wanted to do was disappoint her own teacher, the one who'd taught her all she knew about heroics. She swallowed down the ball of nerves building in her throat. Her parents were watching. Her friends were watching. Even if she didn't make it through, she wanted to show what she could do. Bakugo wanted a strong competitor? She'd give him one. I'll read. For the last match of the first round, we have the explosive powerhouse Bakugo Katsuki and the gravity-defying Uraraka Ochako. I'm sure we're all looking forward to this one, right, Eraser? I will pay you to calm down. Yes, two strong students. I'm sure they both have lots to prove. Aha! And they're both in your class? What does that have anything to do with this? Midnight was waving around her whip. Uraraka wondered, briefly, about adding a whip to her own hero arsenal. It could come in handy, if she learned how to wield it. Alright, I'm sure you both know the drill, but remember, if your opponent is out of bounds, unable to move, or forfeits, I suppose, you win. Ready? And? Uraraka watched Bakugo lean into a fighting stance. She maintained eye contact as she stood, unmoving. His eyes flashed for a second. Midnight cracked her whip. Not a second later, Bakugo blasted himself towards her, his explosions shaking the concrete. She waited until he got closer to her. She leaned forward, holding out her hands. He flung his arm in front of him, his palms starting to glow. She slapped all 10 fingers together, jumping up with all the strength in her legs. Flying up into the air, she watched as his blast struck where she had just been standing. He was taking this very seriously, and she needed to stay out of reach of him. He stumbled, reorienting himself, and spun around to look at her. She grinned. He had a manic look in his eyes, and a smirk ripped its way onto his face. She cancelled her quirk, dropping directly down at him. He flung himself back instantly, and she used her quirk again, just like during the cavalry battle. Whoa, looks like these two are really duking it out. Was that a move from earlier? Yeah, good strategy. Nice to see them thinking on the fly. Uraraka ran forward this time, completely foregoing her previous defense. Bakugo flipped around her with small, controlled blasts. The second his eyes weren't on her, she leaned and smacked the ground where she'd stood before, throwing the debris up. He didn't hesitate to fire off more explosions as soon as he'd landed, the smoke gradually building up as she dodged his attacks. She couldn't see him, so he definitely couldn't see her. She tapped another few chunks of concrete, letting all but one float up and out of sight. She ran in a large circle around the smoke, moving as quietly as possible. She flung the concrete at the center, hoping it was going in the right direction, and cancelled her quirk again. She didn't stop running, she didn't want him to know where she was. There was another, larger blast directly behind her. He broke out of the smoke cloud, glaring at her with a red mark on his temple. Sorry. She really hadn't been aiming for his head. She hoped people wouldn't think she did that on purpose. He flew at her, faster this time. She made a very dumb, very rash decision. She ran at him as well. He brought both hands forward, preparing a blast. She hoped her momentum would be enough. She dropped backwards at the knee, skidding across the concrete below him. Time slowed for a split second. She felt the scraping of concrete through her tracksuit pants and the residual heat of his explosions. He stared at her, wide-eyed, as his blast fired. So he has trouble stopping once he started. Good to know. Time sped up again, and she slapped the concrete beneath her as she went. Her nausea was building. She could feel it, thick and uncomfortable in her stomach and throat. She tapped herself again, pushing up off the ground and into the air right as Bakugo flipped his arms around. This blast was stronger than she had anticipated. The shock pushed her further than she'd have liked. She cancelled her quirk, falling back to the platform close to the edge. He was on her in an instant, firing off again and again before she could pull some new tactic out. She kept tapping the concrete as she went, when she could. He'd changed his approach. He was more aggressive, and he was moving faster. He wasn't smiling anymore. The nausea was getting worse and worse. The heat from his blasts was making the air unpleasantly warm and heavy with smoke. She needed to end this as quick as possible. She pushed towards him, reaching out with both hands. As she'd hoped, he flinched back, out of reach. Before he could blast again, she tapped herself and pushed up and over him. She held her breath as she floated away, holding down the sick feeling in her neck. She wouldn't be surprised if she looked green. She let herself land again, tapping the last few chunks of concrete in sight, bar 2. She needed to stop it. She knew she wouldn't be able to keep it up much longer. He ran at her again, boosting himself with some explosions. She threw the 2 slabs of concrete at him, running backwards. She didn't give him a second before she released her quirk on all the debris floating above them. Bakugo demolished the 2 chunks, following her eye line to the massive accumulation of projectiles. She reveled in the shocked look on his face. She fell to her sore knees, holding her stomach and watching her hard work finally come to fruition. Wait, what? When did she do all that? After almost all of his attacks, she gravitated towards the impact sites. Gathering all that must have taken a toll, she ignored her churning stomach. She had to know if she could win. He leaned back, shifting into a more balanced stance. Raising both hands above his head, he squared his shoulders and let off the biggest explosion she'd ever seen him make. The concrete was shredded with the heat and force of it. She had to squint with the sheer brightness alone. The shockwave that rolled off around them shook her to her core. She felt her teeth chatter against each other. She watched as her hard work, everything that she'd tried to build during that fight, was decimated in one final, devastating blow. She looked back at Bakugo. He was straining. She could see the tension in his arms and his face. She was so close. She tried to stand up again, but the horrible, sick feeling in her stomach was doubling. He turned to her, shaking out his wrists and panting. She leaned over and heaved. In hindsight, she thought she hadn't performed badly. What hurt most was that she knew she was close to beating him, and he knew it too. But she couldn't keep it up. She thought she should be embarrassed for throwing up in the arena, on international television, but she was still proud of what she achieved. Midnight had called off the match, ruling that she couldn't continue in her condition. Bakugo sat down cross-legged to her left as she kneeled, vomiting her meager lunch. He sat with her until she stopped heaving, and Recovery Girl's assistant robots came to take them both to her. The crowd cheered for them as they were carted off. She let herself smile. She lost. No other way to say it. But she gave it her all. Uraraka thought she'd proven herself. She hoped the audience thought that too. Midoriya fell back into his seat, voice hoarse from his cheering. Holy shit, that was so intense. I had no idea where it was going. Ida whistled beside him. Agreed. I had hoped that Uraraka would prevail, but Bakugo has raw power that's unparalleled by most of our class. Going against him at all must have been nerve-wracking. Shinso huffed. I wanted her to win. Midoriya watched as Bakugo and Uraraka were moved off the platform. I hope she's feeling okay. I know she had a lot to prove today. Todoroki glanced at him briefly before looking back at the arena. Cementos had to freshen it up a bit, to put it lightly. Midoriya thought about his next match. Zero Hanta. He wasn't sure what to expect from their fight. They hadn't fought before. Neither of them had very offensive powers, his being portals and Zero's being tape. What kind of tape? Presumably, it was stronger than commercial tape, if he could use it to fling himself around. And it had to be very sticky, if it could stay fastened to so many surfaces. How would he go about their fight? Zero and Todoroki hadn't actually fought, so he had no idea what his strategy or fighting style would be. He took a breath. He should approach this like a puzzle. That's what he's good at. What he's used to. Aperture hadn't been kind to him, but at least he could improvise. He bid farewell to his friends and approached the platform. Are you ready, AE, for the second round? First up, we have the slippery Midoriya Izuku vs. Zero Hanta. I wouldn't want a wax job from this guy. For the love of Mike, please. Midoriya glanced up at the announcement box. Slippery? He didn't love that title. Zero didn't seem that amused by the comments either, if his incredulous look meant anything. He stared down his opponent, rolling up his sleeves. Maybe he should have been paying more attention during their heroics classes. He might have actually had some knowledge he could have used against him. But alas, he didn't think of it. He glanced around the arena. Plenty of concrete he could use, but would Zero fall for it? Realistically speaking, there was only so much Midoriya could do in such a limited space. Not that it stopped him before. He eyed Zero again. The black-haired boy was also limited in what he could do. Not much Spider-Boy could do with no buildings to swing from, especially with the added factor of the bounds. He'd probably try attacking, rather than wait for Midoriya to make the first move. He widened his stance, holding his arms wide at his sides. He watched Zero mimic his position. Interesting. Midnight held up her whip. Same rules as the last round, and don't forget. We will only get involved as a last resort. He knew Midnight had been given a script, but it kind of felt weird. Encouraging students to go completely apeshit against their opponents? What, just for good reviews? It made him uncomfortable. Maybe he should ask her about it after the games. Ready to fight? The crack of her whip was the only warning he got for Zero's opening attack. In an instant, 2 lengths of tape were flying at him. He threw his hands in front of him, backing up a few steps. The tape wound around his forearms, once, twice. He made eye contact with the other. Zero tugged with an unexpected amount of strength, trying to throw him out of bounds. Midoriya felt his feet lose grip, so he let himself skid along before he leapt. He slammed his legs into the ground, tugging his connected arms down with all his might and knocking Zero off balance. Midoriya maintained eye contact with him as he ripped the tape off his synthetic skin. Zero blanched. Did that not hurt? He tossed the tape to his left, smiling. Nope. He let his hands form guns again, familiar, comfortable. Orange, blue. Zero ducked forward, just missing the blue portal snapping open beneath him. Dang, almost had you. Zero gave him a look. He grinned. Instead of staying back, Midoriya sprinted forward, casting portals faster than he had since he was testing. Right, left, orange, blue, repeat. He let the sounds of the stadium fade into the background, not hearing a word his guardians were saying. He controlled his fall through a portal, popping up behind his opponent. He kicked him hard in the back. Zero whipped around, but he popped back through the same portal, letting them shut. He spun around again, gritting his teeth. Midoriya knew they were badly matched. Neither were particularly offensive in terms of fighting capabilities. Both were far more defense and mobility-oriented. They were both out of their depth. Midoriya had nothing to use his gun's gravity control abilities on. Zero couldn't swing around. This could go on for a while, and Midoriya? He snorted. Ain't that the truth? Left, right, left, right, left. Orange, blue, blue, orange, blue, orange. He knew they weren't getting anywhere. Zero grunted and ran at him this time, making no moves to use his tape. Forgoing his power? The fist fight, maybe? That Midoriya could handle. Zero's first punch was dodged. His second, deflected. His third never met its target. Midoriya stepped left, letting Zero's fist fly past him. He grabbed his arm, pulling down and kicking him hard in the stomach with his knee. He released his grip, casting one portal beneath them. He let Zero stand back up, waiting for his next strike before bending at the knee, stretching so far back he saw the massive tunnel out of the arena. He cast the blue portal. It snapped open. Things moved very quick after that. Zero threw himself back, holding out his elbows and wrapping tape around his middle. Midoriya, already off balance, got pulled along with him. Towards the open portal. He shot a new blue portal under Zero. They collided, getting stuck. Midoriya, wrapped in tape. Zero, whose tape had partially stuck to himself and the concrete. They awkwardly bounced between both sides of the portals, stuck to each other. Midoriya felt himself giggle. Zero sighed. What do we do now? Midnight looked very confused. He didn't blame her. She looked up at the commentator's box, shrugging. Reluctantly, she cracked her whip. Well, neither of the students can move, so they will compete in a tiebreaker once they have been extracted. She approached them, tugging back the tape stuck to the concrete. Zero wiggled where they were bopping. She grabbed onto him, tugging them both upwards. Midoriya forgot how strong she was. He let the portals close and she let them back down. They spent the next few awkward minutes pulling tape off themselves. Once they'd been freed, they were ushered back to the center of the arena. Cementos and Midnight conversed quietly, before nodding. All right, we've decided on a tiebreaker. An arm wrestling match. All or nothing right here, right now. Midoriya looked down at his mechanical hands. Zero looked at his unnaturally circular elbows. They shared a sardonic glance. A few minutes and a new concrete platform later, they kneeled, hands grasped tightly. Midoriya focused on the pressure. Not much else he could feel. Unknown to him, Zero wondered why Midoriya's hands were so cold. Ready? 3. They strained against each other. They both needed strong arms for their styles, so naturally this shouldn't have ended any differently to their actual fight. Only, Midoriya was pushing harder than his opponent. He watched Zero's face twist as he shoved his arm down and down. Centimeter by centimeter. Midoriya pushed a little harder, and Zero's arm hit the concrete. And we have our winner, Midoriya Izuku. He got the feeling Hisashi's commentary was a tad biased. Zero sighed. Midoriya held out a hand. The other smiled and shook it. He was proud of himself. Even if that fight was close. Midoriya was getting kind of tired of the festival. It was just the same thing over and over, right? After he'd gone back to his seat, he watched as Ida and Ishido's match begun. The same thing kept happening. Students, children, who want to do well. Being pitted against each other for entertainment. And though the matchups were random, they certainly didn't feel like it. Himself and Zero, two with little offensive power. Ida and Ishido, two of the fastest in their class. Monoma and Kirishima. Monoma could copy his quirk and effectively level the playing field. Bakugo and Tokoyami seemed to be the only group that had a clear underdog. Naturally, a power called Dark Shadow was going to be weak to light. Luckily for Bakugo, he was a walking flare gun. He watched as Ida managed to shove Ishido out of bounds in the 6th minute of their match. He watched Monoma try to use Shinsu's quirk against Kirishima. Midoriya hadn't even noticed him copying it. Kirishima didn't say anything, unfortunately. Charged at full speed, knocking Monoma out of bounds. He watched as Tokoyami desperately tried to keep his companion safe from the light of Bakugo's explosions, only to yield when he was pinned down. It felt anticlimactic. They'd gotten through the first 2 rounds, made it to the final and most watched event. And then they were forced to fight their friends as if they were the criminals in the street, taking them down as quick and as cruelly as possible. And that's what it was, right? Cruel. Letting people build up hope of winning, even at a disadvantage. Even if the odds were stacked against them. He briefly pictured Uraraka. He made a mental note to check on her. The sports festival was not what he had expected. It put a bad taste in his mouth. He knew, regardless of what happened in his fight with Ida, he had reached 3rd place. He knew that, even if he didn't put in any effort, he would have 3 internship offers. Shoyuta, Hizashi and Kiyama were all too kind to essentially give him a free pass. He wondered if he should want to come first. He wasn't sure he wanted to try and do better though. So when he and Ida were up, he waited for the whip. He moved only enough to appear as though he had a plan. And he let himself be shoved out as well. Surprisingly or not, it was Ida against Bakugo in the final. Midoriya felt sick at the thought of Bakugo having to fight his best friend. Kirishima had been a good sport, but it was clear to anyone that he wanted to win. Their match had been won for the ages. Both too quick and too strategic to be caught out easily. Their fight had been a drawn-out one. Ida had used his self-titled ultimate move, Recipro Burst. To his credit, he moved way faster than Midoriya had seen him go before. Bakugo had also employed the use of his new power, Howitzer Impact. When the smoke had cleared, it was Bakugo who stood victorious. Midoriya stared, disinterested. He felt absent in his own head, like he was watching a screen rather than experiencing it firsthand. He couldn't describe what he was feeling. Disappointment, rage, misery. Maybe all, maybe none. He zoned out during the presentation of the medals. He thanked All Might quietly when he and Kirishima received their bronzes. Ida disappeared before he could accept his silver medal. Bakugo held his gold medal tightly, looking up before slipping it around his neck. Midoriya didn't stick around long, he'd prefer to spend time with his friends. When he got back to their seats, he noticed that both Ida and Uraraka were absent. Tsuyu? Have you seen Uraraka? She croaked softly. I went to the infirmary during your fight with Ciro, Karo. We watched it there. She's doing okay, but All Might wanted to talk to her. I'm not sure if they're still talking. Oh, thanks for letting me know. Midoriya was dead tired by the time he got home. Hizashi and Shoyuta had gone out for dinner, so he was by himself in the apartment. Rather than bore himself with work or study, he went directly to his bedroom. After changing into his pajamas, he checked in with Wheatley. He'd really been invaluable during the cavalry battle. He appreciated his help. Rhett had been quiet until Midoriya fell onto his bed. Its voice, devoid of emotion, spoke clearly. This place with its old plantations, these roads leading out to the sea. This day full of promise and potential. More clay pigeons for you and me. All of them, all of them. All of them, all of them. All of them, all of them, all of them, all of them. All lined up. It was the most he'd ever heard Rhett say in one go. He sat up on his bed, watching its glowing red eye. It continued. How long will we ride this way about? How long till someone caves under the pressure? Dreams are haunted by armies of ghosts. Faces too blurry to make out. Numbers far too high to measure. Faces like a vision straight out of Holly Hobby. Late light drizzling through their hair. His eyes twin volcanoes. Bad ideas dancing around in there. All of them, all of them. All of them, all of them dash. Brett? All of them, all of them, all of them, all of them. Sensei, that NPC. All for one's monitor fizzled to life. It wasn't often that Shigaraki called for him. Usually, the boy waited for him like a poor little dog. Whining and weeping until he reappeared. Yes, Shigaraki? His quirk, that cheating bastard. All for One had quickly lost interest in the sports festival. It was, after all, largely the same thing every year. Perhaps he should have stuck around this time. He was holding back at the USJ, but he uses it for a school festival? What, was I not threatening enough? All for One hummed. Shigaraki was working himself up again. Which boy are you talking about? The fucking green-haired one. Portals, teleportation. You told me teleporters were rare, and there he is. Kurogiri isn't half as powerful as this stupid bastard. He can do so much more. He makes me so mad. Portals? Shigaraki stalled in his pacing. His sensei's tone had changed. Yeah. Portals. First he can stop Noma's attacks, and now he can teleport. Fucking cheater. The boy stood very still, awaiting some kind of response. Kurogiri said nothing from behind the bar, endlessly polishing the same glass over and over and over. His sensei hummed. Interesting. Midoriya lay in bed for longer than usual, the morning after the sports festival, staring up at his ceiling. The feeling in his chest hadn't changed. It was like nothing. Empty feeling. A void, maybe. He sighed, spreading his arms wide. A distraction might help. It couldn't make it worse, anyways. He rolled over. Brett? Its eye light lit up, glowing crimson red. It hummed softly. What you said yesterday, was that a prediction or a metaphor? Rhett said nothing. Buddy? I just need to know if I'm going to be attacked in the next week. I don't have the energy for all this paranoia. Rhett beeped once. Give him all that he could drink and it would never be enough. He shot up in bed, staring at the turret. That's not what you said yesterday. Is that a new prediction? Watch where you step. He threw his arms up. For FUCK's sake. I don't know. I need a break. Midoriya stormed past Wheatley and Rhett, pushing his bedroom door open with more gusto than he intended. Shoyuta glanced up at him from down the hall. Kid? You okay? He sighed deeply. Very deeply. Yeah. Oh wait. No, I am not. The tired man raised an eyebrow, patting the seat next to him. Midoriya walked around him, grabbing Chonk and sitting heavily down. She meowed loudly in protest, but made no moves to leave. He let his fingers glide through her fur. Her purring calmed him minutely. I'm so exhausted. I don't fully know why. The sports festival was weird for me. I guess that's where I'll start. Okay. Why was everyone so okay with it? Why is everyone so okay with it? We haven't been in UA for, 3 weeks? And already we're being forced to fight on the world stage. It's weird. I'm being weird, apparently, because everyone else is so okay. Not even pausing to wonder, is it weird that I'm being used for entertainment? Like, please tell me you understand. He watched Shoyuta closely as he pondered Midoriya's musings. I can't say that I understand fully, but I can see where you're coming from. You have to keep in mind, I wouldn't be a hero if it weren't for the sports festival. I'm unintentionally biased. But I think I know what you mean. Children shouldn't be exploited for views or funding or whatever UA gets out of it. He let out a sigh of relief. Yeah, there's that aspect, but there's more to it than that. In this society, criminals like the people that attacked us have easy access to TV and social media. Who's to say they aren't taking notes? I'm pretty sure Shigaraki would love some insight into the powers of the kids he couldn't kill. Midoriya didn't notice Shuta's silence immediately. He turned to him. Shoyuta? The man looked concerned. It was a surprising amount of emotion coming from him. Izuku, is that what were you thinking about yesterday, when you said you were overwhelmed? He gave him a watchful look. Yes? Partially, anyway. Kid, that's incredibly morbid. Midoriya looked away ashamedly, red in the face. No kid, don't be embarrassed, I wasn't trying to insult you. It's just a bit worrying from someone so young. Midoriya huffed, rubbing the bags under his eyes. Yeah, well, I can't exactly stop thinking. Shoyuta went silent for a second. Izuku, we have a longer weekend ahead of us. Is there anything you'd like to do? We could visit Inko or Kayama. Maybe talk to someone? Midoriya looked at him. His tone was awfully careful. What do you mean? He sighed. Kid, you told Inko you'd look into counseling. Have you even thought about it since? Midoriya felt a little cold. Chonk bonked her head into his hand gently. I haven't. It's normal to be a bit apprehensive, but is there more to this? Midoriya looked away. I'm just a little worried. I just that if I get a little too into it, that it'll all just come out at once. It's not exactly a pleasant story, Shoyuta. I know that, but you don't have to say anything you're not ready to talk about. You know that, right? The teen sighed. Yeah. Still, it's kind of intimidating thinking about opening up to a stranger. About everything. How about this? You try one session, and if you don't like it, we can look into other options. He smiled faintly, leaning into Shuta's side. Thank you. I like the sound of that. A day later, after some research and a brief call to Inko, Midoriya was sitting in the waiting room of this particular counselor that apparently specialized in helping younger people. Shoyuta had asked if it was okay to share his file with her, and after some brief thinking, he agreed. It would be a lot easier for him if she already knew what he went through. It would give her enough time to work through the shock, and it would save him from reliving all that. Shoyuta had assured him that she wouldn't talk about him or his past with anyone. Confidentiality and all that. He exhaled. He was nervous, he knew that. Midoriya wasn't exactly accustomed to being open to people he'd never met. He shrunk into the comfort of his shirt. It had been a gift from Hisashi, a shirt of his favorite band of all time. He had absolutely no idea how Hisashi had managed to get his hands on merch that old. After all, My Chemical Romance was from the early 2000s. Even if the Quirk War or whatever hadn't happened, that's still more than 100 years old. He didn't want to know how much it cost. Down the short hall, he heard a door opening. Great, no time to mentally prepare himself. A tall woman with lilac hair rounded the corner with Hisashi, smiling at him softly over the rim of her round glasses. Hello, Midoriya, I assume? Yeah. Nice to meet you. She nodded once, turning back to Hisashi. We should be about an hour. Thank you for meeting me a little earlier than planned. The blonde shot her finger guns. No worries, Duck. My husband and I will be back to pick him up later. Thanks again for squeezing us in so last minute. Not a problem, I had a last-minute cancellation, so I'm happy I could help. Hisashi gave Midoriya a side hug as the boy stood up. Remember, whatever you're comfortable with. He managed a genuine smile, waving the man off. Once they were seated in her comfortable office, she cleared her voice. Okay, Midoriya. My name is Dr. Shinso Azumi. It's lovely to meet you. Midoriya gave her a polite smile. Shinso? She tilted her head. Yes? No, I mean sorry. One of my friends' name is Shinso. She laughed softly to herself. Her voice was deep and smooth, the kind that comes from deep in your chest. It sent little tingles down his spine. He felt himself relax. I wasn't going to mention it unless you did, but yes, Hitoshi is my son. Yamada informed me that the two of you are in the same class. Midoriya was comfortable around her. It usually didn't happen that fast. It's nice to meet you. Shinso talks about you sometimes, all nice things, I promise. He's a really good friend. I'm lucky to have him. She smiled. It was small but very sweet. He probably wouldn't want me talking about him like this, but I'm glad he has you as a friend as well, Midoriya. He smiled. She shook her head a little. I'm sorry, we've already gotten off track. As you know, your guardians allowed me to read about your past. If you don't want to get into that today, we don't have to. So, what would you like to talk about? Okay, he thought, deal with the most pressing junk first. You can get into the other stuff later. He exhaled through his nose. Okay, if you've read my file, I assume you know about aperture? She nodded. He flexed his faux fingers. So, I guess my current issue is that I'm still not adjusted. That's the best way to put it. I've been out of aperture science for months now, but I keep being reminded that I'm not supposed to be here. In this time. He looked at her from the corner of his eyes. She said nothing, but she gave him an encouraging nod to continue. I guess it started with powers. Quirks. Whatever. It doesn't feel real. When I was doing the tests, I could convince myself that I was still using a portal gun, rather than my hands. That's probably confusing, sorry. But being here? Everywhere I look, there's weird and wild superpowers, the likes of which I've literally only seen in comics. He looked down at his hands. and it stops feeling real. I'm constantly checking myself and my surroundings. I'm more paranoid, as if I could just wake up back in Aperture. I didn't say anything to Shoyuta or Hisashi, but I don't feel like I left. Dr. Shinsu's pen scratched gently at her notebook in the background. Would you like to talk about that? He snorted. Where do I even start? It's like I've been 3 separate people, but now all 3 are being stuffed into the one skin. Before Aperture, I was myself. Just me. Living a life I thought was normal. Normal for me. In Aperture, I was a means to an end. I was used to advanced technology through convoluted and tedious tests. I was insulted constantly and put into a sleep state between experiments. I let myself go a little. When I was rescued, I became both of those people, and neither of them at the same time. One minute, I'm freaking out about school, tests and homework, like I did before. The next, I'm staring at my hands and feet for hours on end, wondering why I haven't been called for testing yet. And then I'm faced with situations that I literally couldn't have ever imagined. Heroes, criminals, schools for heroes, and televised sports festivals of all things. I'm finding it impossible to adapt. He sipped at his water bottle awkwardly. That must be confusing. Very. It's like, I was normal before. I haven't the slightest clue how I ended up in Aperture, but while I was there, I changed. But I'm normal again, as normal as I can be. So what am I between now and then? Should I be scared? When does this feeling go away? Her knowing eyes didn't reveal a thing. What feeling? Just wrong. Nothing. A void. She put down her pen, readjusting herself in her seat. Midoriya, I want you to know that I will not lie to you in any of our sessions, if you choose to continue talking to me. Okay. Apathy, is that what you're feeling? He thought about it briefly. Yeah, I think so. Sometimes I have trouble feeling any sort of way about what's happening. Could you elaborate on that? Well, during the sports festival, I kept thinking, this is sick. Making kids fight each other for the entertainment of the masses, it's not right, and I just got so tired of it. I felt disconnected from myself, like I was watching in the third person. She hummed. Thinking about it now, how did that make you feel? Midoriya stared at the clock on the wall. Weird. Kind of scared, looking back. I didn't feel like myself. She wrote a few lines into her notebook. I'm glad you are able to identify these emotions. Did that sort of thing happen to you before the testing facility? Midoriya hesitated. Not really sure. Not sure. Sorry. You don't know. I've been drawing a lot of blanks. Especially from before I ended up in Aperture. Her eyes carried some kind of emotion. Midoriya wasn't in the mood to try and pick apart her expression. She made one final note in her little book, closing it and placing it on the coffee table to her left. I appreciate that you're willing to open up to me about all of this. Memory loss is very common in cases involving traumatic experiences, so you shouldn't feel bad about it at all. I promise you. He sighed deeply. Okay. If you wish to continue talking to me about whatever you'd like, I can try and help you work through some of the things you've brought up. If you want my help, you'll have to be open to yourself, as well as me. Is that something you're comfortable with? He didn't need to think about it. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Shit's getting real, huh? She smiled again, and he felt warm. Like she really, genuinely wanted to help him feel okay again. He sniffled quietly. Wordlessly, she pushed a box of tissues over to him. The rest of their chat had been more surface level. It certainly wasn't what he had been expecting. He wasn't even sure what he had been expecting. A Hannibal Lecter situation? Having all his problems vanish with a word? Nothing? He was curious about her notes. He wanted to know what she thought needed to be written down. Regardless, he thought, his chest felt a little lighter when he walked out of her office. Shoyuta and Hisashi were chatting with the secretary in the waiting room. He knew he had a long way to go, seeing as he'd literally only pondered his problems for an hour, but he felt kind of okay. Maybe not okay, but he felt like he could be okay. Sometime soon. He smiled. Midoriya shifted in his seat. The weekend had gone by a lot faster than he wanted it to. His talk with Dr. Shinso had been comforting. She didn't pity him, didn't put him in an awkward position by getting upset. Honestly, he was surprised she kept such a cool and calm demeanor. His life was kind of a shit show. Shinso poked his shoulder behind him. Turned. You doing okay? I should have asked before now, but you got a bit weird during the festival. I just want to make sure you don't vanish someday. Midoriya knew he was trying to be sarcastic, but he picked up on the slight desperation in his voice. His mind went back to the boy's mother. He smiled. I'm okay. It's kind of a long story. Shinso looked away. Speaking of long stories, have you spoken to Ida? Midoriya's eyebrows lowered. What? No, did something happen? Shinso gave him a weird look. Dude, his brother got attacked. Apparently they think he'll be paralyzed from the waist down permanently. Midoriya's eyebrows met his hairline. He felt sick to his stomach. What the fuck? Holy shit. Yeah, it's messed up. Ida left the festival early. I think Ingenium got attacked during it. The hero killer, according to the news. Midoriya got the feeling he should know who the hero killer is. He didn't say anything. He glanced around the room, briefly waving at Todoroki and smiling at Uraraka, Tsuyu and Tokoyami. We should talk to Ida, right? It feels wrong to let it go unsaid. Midoriya turned back to Shinso. I don't know if he isn't comfortable talking about it yet. I don't want to push him. They shared a pained look. What to do? I'll ask Uraraka what she thinks later. Midoriya didn't get the chance to respond before Eraserhead slammed the door open. Instantly, the room went quiet, not a person out of place. Good, you're getting faster. He stood up behind the podium, giving them a tired once-over. Well done, you all worked very hard during the sports festival. If any of you actually read the information packets I gave out on the first day, you'd know that the next thing on all of your calendars should be internships. A few excited murmurs reached Midoriya's ears. The sports festival was one opportunity you all had to show off your stuff to pro heroes across Japan. Some of you have received internship offers, which I will give out in a moment. For the sake of motivation, I'm going to show who received the most offers. This is not to demean or insult any of you, just to show you who the pro heroes were leaning towards. He clicked a button on a small remote, and the projector whirred to life, displaying how many offers each student received. No way, Bakugo got 4,000 offers? What the hell, man? Midoriya scanned through the list. He came in at number 7, only a few less offers than Todoroki. He was surprised he was as high up as he was, especially considering he couldn't really show off what he was capable of under the conditions of the games. He also knew 3 or 4 of the offers he got were from his family. Shoyuta, Hizashi and Kayama definitely put in for him, even though he didn't necessarily want them to. He spotted Shinsu's name. It was uncomfortably low on the list. He didn't say anything. Eraserhead made quick work of handing out the offers. Bakugo looked uncomfortable with his massive stack of them. By the way, you have to make a decision before the end of class tomorrow. He watched the blonde sigh. Poor guy. He drew his attention back to his own pile, flicking through his offers. He had never heard of half the heroes in his pile. Whether that meant they were lesser known, or he was just completely unaware, he didn't know. He flicked some more. But there they were. Present Mike, Eraserhead, Midnight. Midoriya. He turned in his seat. Shinso was looking at him in amusement. Yeah. You'll never guess who gave me an offer. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Who? Guess. Midoriya frowned. Tell me, there's way too many to guess. Nope, kiss. He huffed and rolled his eyes. I don't know, Nedzu. Shinso shivered. What the hell, no? I die. No, it's Midnight. What the fuck, why Nedzu? I don't know, you made it sound so wild. Midnight is cool. Why is that so weird? Shinso scratched his neck. Well, she's so spotlight, you know? I just thought it was weird that she asked me. I'm not exactly what one would call flamboyant, dude. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. What? He smiled. Nothing. No, tell me. It's just, you are kind of dramatic, is all. Shinso gave him a disgusted look. You know I'm not. How could you even suggest that? That's it, I'm leaving. Friendship with Midoriya ended. Hatsum is now my best friend. Midoriya snorted and shoved his shoulder. The sarcasm is getting old. King, find a new thing. Shinso smiled sweetly, flipping him off. Shoyuta cleared his voice at the top of the room. All right, look through those on your own time. Once you've picked, Fill out the form and hand it back to me. Now, this next class period will be an imperative to your individual hero careers. The atmosphere was tense. Midoriya had absolutely no energy left in him to care. Picking your hero names? He heard more than one sigh of relief. Since I am completely unqualified to do this, I've asked Midnight to come in and help you all pick good names. Do not give her trouble. She knows the business. She knows what names will work and what won't. Shoyuta wrapped himself in his sleeping bag, dead to the world mere seconds later. Midnight entered the room as if on cue, a stack of mini white bards in her arms. All right, kiddies. You heard Eraser. I'll be helping you choose your hero names. Please keep in mind, these can be changed later, before you become a full-fledged hero, but it might be hard to maintain a following. Anyways, I'll give you all 5 minutes to brainstorm, and we can get into it. Midoriya stared at his board. What the hell kind of name could he pick now that he wouldn't hate in a week? Midoriya couldn't even come up with a hero costume he liked. His original outfit was already boring to him. Why do they let young teens pick their own names? Fucksock. He stared at the white for a second longer. What could he even pick? Any name with the words portal, teleport, or transfer would be incredibly cliché. He wanted his name to be cool, while also maintaining his sense of humor. In conclusion, he couldn't take himself seriously if he tried. He bit his lip as he scribbled, trying not to giggle. His turn would be soon. The electrifying hero, Charge Bolt. I love it. The pink hero, Alien Queen. Try not to be too scary and it's perfect. Remember, kids will want to support you as well. The rainy season hero, Froppy, Caro. So cute. The anti-gravity hero, Uravity. Amazing. Yamakumo. Midnight gave Bakugu a careful look. Interesting choice, I like it. I cannot stop twinkling. It's a little long, why not shorten it to twinkling? How about the twinkling hero Briller? It's French for shine. Brilliant. Midoriya flung his arm up as Aoyama walked back to his seat. Midoriya, would you like to go next? He practically jogged to the podium, slamming his board down with more force than necessary. The momentum hero, Quantum. It's short for quintessential underappreciated and necessary teenager under management. He smiled, smug and pleased with himself. Kiyama snorted into her fist. Trying to suppress her obvious laughter, she threw him a thumbs up. He strutted back to his table, falling back into his seat. Shinso stood up behind him, not waiting for permission. The puppeteering hero Mindfuck. Reminder, I am planning on going underground, so I do not follow the laws of the land. Midnight had calmed down somewhat. Thank you for the reminder. Considering the circumstances, I think it's wonderful. Very creative. He shot back into his seat. He whispered aggressively under his breath. Why the fuck is she being so nice to me? Todoroki approached him, somehow not attracting Midnight's attention. Midoriya. I need you help. Midoriya went stiff. What's happening? What do you need? Todoroki stared at him for a second. I need help with my name. He deflated. Oh thank fuck, I thought you were dying or something. Do I look ill? No. It's nothing. What have you got so far? Todoroki nodded sharply. Okay, I came up with this dash. Midoriya smiled encouragingly. Shudo. His smile turned confused. Todoroki didn't say anything else. Just looked at him. Oh, that's it? Yes. What do you think? Midoriya bit down on his lips. He heard Shinso choking on his laughter behind him. Okay, it's, a little stiff? Todoroki nodded fiercely, holding up his whiteboard. Stiff, good note. Do you have any other notes? Shinso masked his laugh with a cough this time. Midoriya closed his eyes for a second. Well, it's just your name, right? That is correct. Midoriya felt himself shaking. Midoriya, what is wrong? He felt his voice reach a higher octave. Nothing. Nothing. It's just, why not try something a little more creative? Like what? Well, something related to temperature, maybe? Like entropy, Celsius. Polarity. You know? Todoroki gave a sharp nod, walking up to the podium rather than back to his seat. A friend gave me this name, so it means a lot to me. I hope I can repay him for all he's done for me. So I'll start with this. The fluctuating hero, polarity. Midnight put a hand to her chest. Wow, so inspiring. Perfect choice. Alright, who's next? There's no way. Midoriya met Todoroki's eye while he walked back to his seat. He was looking a little too happy. It made Midoriya both pleased and sad at the same time. Shinso was still trying to catch his breath behind him. The second Kiyama was looking the other way, he punched him in the arm. Ida. Alright, come on up. Midoriya snapped out of his thoughts. Ida. His friend was dealing with some real rough shit. He didn't know how to be there for him, he hadn't quite gauged how Ida liked being comforted yet. He'd help in whatever way he could, but first he needed an opportunity to talk to him. Ida blankly held up his board. The name's Tenya was written in beautiful calligraphy that he thought was just Ida's handwriting. Midnight paused. Just Tenya? Are you sure? He nodded once, moving back to his seat. Yeah, Midoriya definitely needed to talk to him. Only, every time he tried, Ida would brush him off. Empty smiles and patronizing placations. It was frustrating to no end. Uraraka and Shinso looked as fed up of it as he was by the end of lunch. Ida was avoiding talking about it. Midoriya had meant what he said though, he didn't want to push. So how should he go about it? Back home, he was sat in his room reading through his offers. He sighed. He knew that Shoyuta and Hizashi were friends with Ingenium. He knew they were a little shaken up about his attack. He didn't want to bother them about this. Might as well go with the safer route, he supposed. He looked through his pile once more. There were a few he was curious about, but one stood out to him the most. Snipe. The gunslinging hero. He was a teacher in ZUA, so he had experience teaching students. He had a gun quirk, so he had to have some advice that could help Midoriya out, surely. Steeling himself, he plucked Snipes off from the top of the pile and filled out the form. Hopefully this wouldn't be a waste of time. He smiled, content with himself. He shuffled towards his computer. Opening up the search function, he typed in the name Shinso had told him earlier. The hero killer. 3 hours and an energy drink later, Midoriya had gone down some rabbit holes he could never climb out of. The hero killer. Strikes 5 times in one city, then moves to the next. Foreign Hosu. Believed to have been a vigilante. Stendhal. Possible footage of him? His morals, a lot of posts and forums about what he stood for. Fake heroes, culling, cleansing. Problems with the hero commission. He slammed down on the power button. Deep diving now wouldn't lead to anything good. He sighed roughly. His exhaustion was creeping up on him. He needed sleep. He needed to talk to Ida. He needed to figure out what Red had been talking about. He collapsed onto his bed. And he was out. Midoriya was dreaming again. He had to be. It had certainly been a while since he'd had any weird dreams. He looked around him, glancing at his hands. He was himself, at least. Hopefully that was a good sign. Distantly, he could hear a voice muttering continuously, but he couldn't make out what was being said. Everything was dark, though the area closest to him was lit up like a spotlight. He felt eyes on him, but the light was blinding. He held an arm up, trying to shield his eyes. He could just make out several figures standing just beyond the reach of the light. What's going on? His tone was light, but inside he was getting a weird feeling. The disembodied voice in the background got louder, but it was too muffled to discern what was being said. He spun in place, looking for anything else in this odd dreamscape. Okay, a little weird. The voice cut out with a sharp bang. The light above him flickered erratically. He squinted into the darkness, trying to gauge who was staring back at him. The light shut off. Midoriya could hear movement around him, but his eyes wouldn't adjust to the dark. The spotlight flickered on again, only this time, the figures were closer. He looked around at them all. 7 of them, 8 including a strange, yellow flame. Faceless. He stepped closer to the woman in front of him. Her dark hair cascaded down gracefully, and her outfit reminded him of some of the pro heroes he'd seen. He tried to focus on her face, but his head felt fuzzier and fuzzier the closer he looked. He stepped back suddenly. There was a buzz from somewhere above them. The voice clicked and glitched before starting back proper. He could faintly make out a more feminine voice, but still no words. She sounded familiar though. He angled his head towards the light, and slowly, her voice became clearer. In his youth, Cave Johnson became a successful business entrepreneur. Having his father's theories as the backbone, in 1943 he founded Aperture Fixtures, a shower curtain developer and manufacturer. GLaDOS. His early success came from Aperture Fixtures, as the company was developing high-tech shower curtains for most branches of the United States military as well as the public. He became a billionaire. Why can't I see you? Cave Johnson purchased a huge salt mine in Upper Michigan, whose tunnels extended over 4 kilometers below surface level. The main Aperture Fixtures facility was constructed within the underground caverns. Midoriya felt his mind dragging him back long before he got out of Aperture Science. Back before he lost his hands. He thought of the audio clips, what little he had learned about Aperture in the years he spent there. Cave Johnson? Was he the guy from the tapes? In 1947 he decided to take a more broad scientific approach to Aperture Fixtures, and promptly renamed the company Aperture Science. Cave Johnson began to focus on experimental physics, and although Johnson was well known for his unorthodox approach to science, Aperture Science received an award for Best New Science Company the same year it was established. He said nothing. Could she not hear him? Her voice paused for a moment. Midoriya held his breath. Yes, Mr. Johnson? GLaDOS? Of course, Mr. Johnson. He needed a minute. There had to be something he could say. This is one weird-ass dream. Right away, Mr. Johnson. It was like a light going off in his head. He knew what to say. He'd heard it time and time again as GLaDOS ripped his flesh and bone away from him. It was one of the few absurdities he'd held on to. It had distracted him from the constant pain he was living with in Aperture. All right, I've been thinking. He waited. GLaDOS said nothing. He wasn't sure if he preferred nothing to whatever she had been saying since the dream started. When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Yeah. Get mad. I don't want your damn lemons. What am I supposed to do with these? Yeah. Take the lemons. Demand to see life's manager. Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? You tell him. Midoriya could feel himself getting more and more worked up. His voice got louder and he was talking faster and faster. I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down, with the lemons. I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down. Burn his house down. This guy's saying what we're all thinking. He inhaled sharply. The speech was as ridiculous as anything, but he knew it was the rambling of a man at the end of his rope. Cave Johnson was dying and he was getting desperate. GLaDOS though? He knew she wasn't telling him everything. Maybe he could finally get what he wanted. Dash. I was beginning to think you had forgotten about me. I'm almost hurt. Her voice had gone back her usual monotone, but he got the feeling she was amused. How could I? Indeed, you certainly left an impression on me. When you tried to kill me. You monster. He looked vaguely upwards. Kill you? What do you mean? Need I remind you that while the facility was preparing to self-destruct around us, someone thought it would be a good idea to use a paradox on me? Me, the one in control of the whole facility. What do you think happened after you left? Midoriya stuttered to a stop. What did he think had happened? He didn't. His eyes widened. He left Aperture Science in the wake of a massive explosion, but he never asked what happened after that. Shoyuta, he never told him. You didn't ask either. Based on the tests you had undergone, I thought you would be shouldering the blame of what happened. Imagine my surprise when I find you are doing the opposite. Blame for what? Aperture was a prison, I was lucky to get out. And what about all of the other test subjects? You're not that special. I had others lying around. He felt cold. Others? And what about the people that risked their short lives to try and save you? Did you ask about them? He felt his heart stutter in his chest. I'm asleep. I want to wake up. How many people survived, you might be wondering. I don't have to wonder. Shut up, this isn't happening. Not many people. A test subject, a few outsiders and a faulty turret. Brett? You named it. Isn't that sad? I have to say, I didn't think you would be so needlessly cruel. There was a beep behind him. What are you going to do, Quantum? He spun around, looking directly into Rhett's eye. It was much, much taller. Rhett? You okay, buddy? Rhett watched him. Midoriya had forgotten how similar GLaDOS and the turret's voices were until Rhett spoke. Lead with your heart and you will prevail. Midoriya jerked forward in bed, breathing heavily. Dream. Dream, it was a dream. That's it. He gripped the fabric of his shirt. It took him longer to calm down than he wanted to admit. He really needed to mention these dreams to Dr. Shinso. Stumbling out of his room, he searched the apartment for Shoyuta or Hizashi or anyone. Hizashi was in the kitchen. Shoyuta was sipping coffee, smiling over the rim at him. He basically fell into them. Whoa, little listener, you alright? Kid? Did you sleep at all? He let out a choked sigh, shoving down the ever-climbing feeling of dread in his neck. His eyes were burning. He felt 2 sets of arms wrap around him. He pushed back from them. What happened, Eraserhead? Shuta's eyes widened. Hizashi looked between them. What? How many? How many people died so I could be here? They stared at him in silence. It was deafening, sickening. They said nothing. Midoriya gripped his shirt so tight he could feel the pressure shake his prosthetics. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the floor. Why did you never tell me? What, did you think I was better off not knowing? People died for me, would you not want to be given that same fucking courtesy? He looked up sharply. Shoyuta was looking through him, staring at a point on the wall. He looked haunted. Hizashi looked close to tears. Midoriya's anger stuttered out. No, I didn't dash. Hizashi had told him. A while ago, yeah, but he knew. He knew they lost someone close to them. And Ingenium just got attacked. I'm so sorry, that's not what I meant. Shoyuta still wouldn't look at him. The devastation in his expression made Midoriya's insides curl. Hizashi had his hands on his husband's shoulders, trying to talk to him. Midoriya took a step back, and another. Finally, he focused on him. Midoriya couldn't maintain eye contact. Kid, it's okay. I'm sorry. He felt his tears claw their way back out, pouring around his eyes. Please don't apologize, I didn't mean to say that. He felt bolted in place. Gently, as if he would break, the man's arms rested across his back. He wrapped himself around Shoyuta as if he would disappear if he let go. Hizashi let out a dramatic sob. I'm joining this right now and you are not going to say anything about it? About 5 minutes into their group hug, Midoriya realized he was lucky they all woke up at obscenely early hours. He still had to get ready for school. The thought of being in the school environment for however many hours made him feel sick. Could I spend lunch in the staff room today? I don't feel great. He felt Shoyuta nodding. Of course, kid. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, I should have been honest with you, but you were going through so much all at once, and I didn't want to add this to the pile of things you had to come to terms with. I realized that it wasn't fair to keep it from you. Can I ask what brought this on? Midoriya sniffed, leaning further into Shuta's shoulder. I've been having some weird dreams. This one had GLaDOS in it talking to me. Hizashi shifted. Which one is GLaDOS again? Big scary one, hanging from the ceiling when I found Midoriya. Who gotcha? She was needling at me, pushing me. I don't know why I'm only dreaming about her now, last time was nowhere near this weird. Last time? He turned to Hizashi. Yeah, I was in Aperture, but when she started talking it ended. It was nothing personal, I guess. This time, she knew what happened and what I've been doing. She asked if I knew how many people survived, and how many didn't. He felt Shoyuta grip him a little tighter. Kid, I know I should have told you, but I don't even know. I didn't want to know the specifics, so Tsukachi didn't tell me. He kept it vague, and I've avoided thinking about it since. Midoriya nodded. Did he say anything about other test subjects? He paused. Oh. But before the mission, it was a young pro that found the facility. Her quirk lets her identify certain biological signatures, and she found thousands of them there. We have no way of knowing if they were like you, or if they were vegetables. After the explosion had cooled and it was safe to investigate, they still couldn't find any trace of them. I'm sorry, but I have no idea. He sighed. That's okay. I'm sorry again. I really didn't want to upset you. Hizashi gave his hair a pat. It's okay, little listener. Obviously we miss Oboro a lot, but it was a long time ago. We might not be over it, but we've come to terms, I think. Shoyuta huffed, drawing back from him. Don't get all sappy on me, I think we've all had enough emotions for the day. Speaking of, kid, you should get ready for school. Did you pick an internship offer? Yeah, I went with Snipe. I think it'll be good. Hisashi smiled. Well, it better, or I will leave him a very strongly worded review on my radio show. He and Shoyuta made eye contact. I forget he can be passive-aggressive sometimes. You and me both, kid. Midoriya retained nothing from his classes. He knew his friends were getting concerned. Even Ida asked if he had slept all right, and he looked like he hadn't slept since the sports festival. He spent lunch napping with Shoyuta, actively ignoring all the pictures Kiyama was taking of them. Midoriya was also pretending the hero he chose to intern with wasn't sitting 2 meters away from him. He submitted his internship application, tried talking to Ida and went home again. It was the same the next day. And the day after that. He'd done a lot of research on the hero killer since that night. He had spent many late nights scouring the net for any clues as to why Ingenium was attacked. Hell, he knew why the hero killer would try to kill one more in Hosu before moving on to the next town. He knew so much, but he still felt lost. The hero killer harmed people he thought were faking their philanthropy. He didn't like heroes with endorsements or extensive merchandise. He didn't like heroes that took too much pride in their fame. He didn't like heroes that abused the system. The more Midoriya learned about the Hero Commission, the less he trusted it. He sighed. Best not to get into all of that. The hero killer saw All Might as the one true hero. The love he had for the American-themed hero confused Midoriya. All Might was the #1 hero. He was always in the spotlight. He had so much merchandise Midoriya couldn't list it all. To be fair to All Might, he did donate the majority of his earnings to charity. Stain confused him. Surely, there had to be more heroes worth his time. Why not Present Mike? The man worked 3 jobs, took in a rescue cat and a rescue son. He inspired hundreds of thousands. Why not underground heroes, like Eraserhead? Where did he draw the line? What could Midoriya possibly say to Ida? The boy had chosen Manuel for his internship. Midoriya wasn't stupid. He looked up where Manuel's agency was the second he heard where Ida was going. At the station, the 20 of them, all with their bags and hero costumes. Eraserhead flitting around, making sure everyone had what they needed. Midoriya watched Ida from where he stood. Shinso, Uraraka, Tsuyu and even Tokoyami tried talking to him. Nothing. Todoroki wasn't exactly the talking kind, not yet anyway. Hatsum wasn't much help either, unfortunately. She tried, she really did, but she couldn't get through to Ida any more than they could. Midoriya was sick of being gentle about it. He moved without saying anything, and he didn't stop until he was directly in front of Ida. Ida. Midoriya? The trains will be arriving soon. You should wait at your platform. No. Not yet. Look, I've been trying all week, but you haven't been hearing me. I know you want to find Stain. Ida's mask cracked for a second. Excuse me? Stain has killed so many heroes, Ida. I don't want to come back to school only to find out you died alone in a back alley somewhere. Please, just think about what you're trying to accomplish here. You can talk to me, please talk to me. I want to help you if you'll let me. We're friends, right? Ida looked down. There was an uncomfortable pause, and Midoriya felt there was something going unsaid. He looked back. Up, the mask fully intact again. Thank you, Midoriya, but it won't be necessary. I'll see you next week. Midoriya watched him board the train, speechless. He just told Ida that he knew what he was going to try, and he still went. Midoriya didn't recognize that boy. He felt sick again. Shoyuta was standing nearby, and soon had an armful of teenager. Shoyuta, I'm scared for Ida. I know. I've contacted Manuel, but you know we can't keep him under surveillance. He isn't in the right headspace, and he's smart. He could try it regardless of how reckless it is. I'm going to be so pissed if he gets himself killed. Shoyuta chuckled. Be sure to tell him that the next time you see him. They separated, and Midoriya got on his train. Snipe met him at his station, offering to carry his bag and everything. Eraser let on you might be joining me, partner. I took the liberty of making sure you'd be comfortable. Midoriya's thoughts calmed a little. Oh, that's very kind of you, thanks. No thanks necessary. Just doing my part to be a good hero, kid. He really wanted to question the hero's accent. It was some cross between Japanese and deep South American. Anywho, we'll spend today getting settled and maybe do some target practice, if that's soundin' okay to you. That sounds great, can't wait. Their walk wasn't the longest, but Midoriya's mind had plenty of time to wander. He'd texted his friends to wish them well, and all of them has opened it, bar Ida. If he didn't know any better, he'd assumed the boy had turned off his phone. Hatsum had messaged him, but she said he didn't open her messages either. He sighed, shoving his phone back into his pocket. Alrighty partner, we're here. My sidekick here'll take you to your room, get changed and meet me in the shootin' range. Midoriya smiled. Got it? The room was small, but it was very nicely decorated with some old movie posters adorning the walls. Old by Snipe's standards, basically new by Midoriya's. His costume had been redesigned, per his request. Gone were the hoodie and joggers. He shuddered to think that was all he could come up with. Hatsum's visor was a permanent fixture now, with Wheatley all loaded up and ready to go. He had a 3/4 length black turtleneck with neon blue accents. He had a cropped, short-sleeved, neon orange jacket with a high collar. Inspired by Mina, of course. Along with those, he had black, wide-legged shorts that came down just past his knees. They made him look both taller and shorter at the same time. He loved them. He still had his utility belt with all his little knickknacks and such, only it was easier to access them now. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at himself in the mirror. Well, now or nothing. I know you didn't ask, but I think your new outfit's really nice. How cool is that, right? The lovely portal colors and such. It's amazing. I'm really glad I'm able to come along as well. I think I'll have quite a good time out and about, among the humans. You know? Midoriya smiled. Yeah, I'm glad I have you with me, Wheatley. He could understand why the gunslinger hero would make use of a gun range, but for some reason the fact that it was just in his agency made him giggle. Absurd, right? The hero was waiting for him when he arrived. I like your costume, partner. Now, how's your aim? Thanks, and good I guess? Snipe beckoned him closer, handing him an unloaded handgun. I know your quirk isn't shooting normal guns, but I want to gauge where you're at. I'll show you how to load that. A quick tutorial later, Midoriya was holding the gun aloft, aiming for the target on the other side of the lane. He let himself fall into the zone, exhaling once. He fired off 6 shots in rapid succession, all of which hitting their mark. 3 to the head, 2 to the chest and 1 to the dick. Midoriya could sense Snipe's eyes on him through the hero's mask. What? I'm just showcasing my range. Well, you clearly have good aim, wanna try again? Different gun this time? Midoriya shrugged. Sure, sounds fun. About 3 separate firearms later, Midoriya was getting a bit bored of it. Is this what we're doing for the rest of the day? Snipe gave a one-shoulder shrug. It can be, but if you prefer we can do something else. Like what? Combat maybe? How are you at fightin'? They moved to the gym, a nice, modern style with high ceilings. So, you and Aizawa spar sometimes, yeah? Midoriya blinked. Did he tell you that? Yeah, man doesn't stop talking about ya. If y'all were practicing together, I assume you can fight. Can you use your quirk for me for a second? Midoriya held a hand up to the nearest wall, letting it shift into a portal gun. He fired off the orange portal and shot the blue one right next to it. Snipe approached the portals, sticking an arm through and watching it poke out the other, right in front of his face. That is trippy. Anywho, tell me how your quirk works, all of it. Well, I can only use 2 portals at a time, blue and orange. They can only open on materials that contain basalt. My hands can cancel out gravity on object when I hold them, but I couldn't tell you if it has a weight limit. My legs can cancel out basically any and all forces that act on them. If I fall from a height, as long as I land on my feet, it's like I never fell. Certainly lucky that your quirk developed like that. Some poor misfortunes have quirks and no adaptations. To get back on track, what do you think you need my help with, partner? Midoriya let the portals on the wall close when Snipe stepped back over to him. I guess I'd like to know how you incorporate fighting with your power. Well, to be clear, my quirk isn't just that I have a gun. My quirk is called homing. It lets me lock on to any target I can see within 600 meters, and make any projectile I release chase after said target. The gun just so happens to be a convenient weapon. I'm also trained in archery. When I'm fightin', I don't try firing until I'm able to safely use my weapon without being interfered with, but I do other things to compensate. I know it'll different for you though. Let's spar, get in some practice? Midoriya's eyebrows raised. Okay. Good, I'll attack you. Try to use your portals to get away. Midoriya took a few steps closer to him, lowering into a ready stance. Snipe took off his red cloak, rolling out his shoulders and neck. Ready? Go. He immediately ran at him, not giving Midoriya any time to think. He had to dodge 2 punches and grapple before he could get a second to shoot a single portal behind him. This guy really was the real deal. Midoriya jumped back, taking the opportunity to cast his second portal on the ceiling on the other side of the gym. He shot through them, landing a good 15 meters from the hero. Midoriya spun around to face Snipe, only to find a gun trained on him. Oh shit. He stalled, hands raised. Good first try. It seems you're having trouble staying on the offensive in general, but specifically when trying to use your portals. Remember, your fightin' style should make up for what your quirk can't do. If your quirk isn't offensive, you better be fightin' offensively. Got it? Got it? Good, let's try again. It had been a few days since he'd arrived at Snipe's agency. The hero was a lot more insightful than Midoriya had anticipated, but then again, Snipe was a teacher of the 3rd years in UA. Had to be good at what he did. They'd sparred a few more times that first day, and again the second day. Midoriya thought he was getting the hang of it, but then again he might be biased. They'd done a patrol of the area that second day as well. It was short, a quick lap around the surrounding buildings and back, though they did stop a thief at the bank, so that was fun. On the morning of his 3rd day, Snipe had decided that they were going to patrol in Tokyo that night, to really get a feel for the crime that goes on in big cities. It might be a bit daunting, but it's good to get used to a more active area. Plus, I'll be there the whole time, so there's no need to be nervous. Midoriya gave a half smile, heading back to his room for his hero costume. He changed in good time, so he took a minute to check his messages. Still nothing from Ida. Clicked on their message chain. Ida had opened the messages. He opened it but didn't answer. Midoriya backed out, frustrated. Of course, Ida had literally all his friends reaching out to him and still chose to ignore them. It was so out of character. Don't get him wrong, Midoriya understood that grief could cause people to behave in weird ways, but this was such a 180-degree turn. There was a pit in his stomach. He thought about what Red had said. He thought about his dream. He thought about his friends. He left the room. You better make this quick, I have things to attend to. Akaguro Kaizome had better things to be doing than listening to some man-baby whine about his vision. Well, I think it's clear why we're all here. We would like to hire you. Stain couldn't stand people like him. People with ridiculous motives that benefit no one. He didn't lower his katana. Hire me to what exactly? What are your motivations? This league of yours is a joke. He watched Shigaraki's fist tense ever so slightly. An obvious one at that. Amateur. Motivations? I don't need motivations. I want to destroy what I don't like. Stain ground his teeth. The disrespect of this man-child. It infuriated him. What kind of an answer is that? Please don't be rude, we are very serious about our goals. He glanced at the mist man, Kurogiri. He unsettled Stain. Permanent calm, seemingly, followed him everywhere he went. Polishing glasses as long as he'd been in the bar, despite them all being spotless. Shigaraki plucked up a photo on the bar's counter. A green-haired boy, Stain recognized him from the sports festival. A UA student. Speaking of what I don't like, this kid. He really pissed me off, but you can't kill him. If you happen to run into him, I want to know what you learn. Stain did a mental double take. What reason could you possibly have for asking me to stalk this child? I don't harm teenagers, I've been very clear about that. I'm not asking you to hurt him. My sensei is interested in him, and we want information. That's all I'm asking you. He looked at them, disgusted. I don't respect what you're trying to do. Your lack of motives is ridiculous. Why is that? Don't you want to destroy shit you don't like as well? That's all you've been doing so far. He tilted his head back slightly. This man, barely an adult, really was lucky to have gotten as far as he had in the underworld. Stain briefly considered killing him, but he didn't want the likes of Jiren on his back forever. Too much attention. He also wasn't sure what Kurojirai was capable of. Anyone in the know about the League knew they had a teleport. How powerful? Depends on who you ask. Stain didn't like lots of variables. Too many possibilities. He narrowed his eyes. This society is overgrown with fake heroes, operating to the benefit of themselves rather than to the benefit of society. I call these fakes. The ones not deserving of the title of hero. It's certainly becoming a term we throw around lightly these days. The word is starting to lose its true meaning. People are starting to forget that they're not supposed to be celebrities. All Might is the only true hero left. He took a step closer to Shigaraki. Kurojirai paused his polishing for a brief moment. And then there are criminals like you, running around causing problems for problems' sake. Power beyond what you deserve, being exploited to make life harder for the masses. The grip he had on his katana tightened. He felt the bones in his hand grind as he squeezed. People like you shouldn't be allowed to roam the streets. People like you deserve to be called. There was a pause. He struck, knocking Shigaraki off his stool and stabbing Kurojirai in one swipe. Licking the blood, he spun his katana around and buried it into the man-child's shoulder. The scream he let out was wonderful. You have no real motivations, you have no members. This organization of yours is full of weak, aimless fools. Shigaraki shook as Stain's katana shifted in his shoulder. Kurojirai, get this bastard out of here. Shigaraki, I can't move. The portal won't open. Shigaraki screeched, frustrated. Stain hadn't inused his blood, but he assumed the pain of a stab wound in the shoulder would be enough to keep him down. Apparently not. He watched keenly as he reached a hand up, corroding the blade lodged in him. If this stupid society wants to worship fucking All Might, I'll destroy him and the rest of those sheep. I'll show them why they're wrong. Stain stepped back, letting Shigaraki stumble to his feet. Maybe you do have some conviction. If you want anyone to follow you, you're going to need more than that. You're not welcome in my league. Kurojirai, can you move? The teleporter slowly pushed himself up off the bar. Shigaraki, please reconsider. Your sensei said he would be of use to us. He gripped his wounded shoulder tighter. No. Get him out of here. Stain tossed his ruined katana aside. Yes, take me back to Hosu, please. You've interrupted my work and wasted my time. Reluctantly, Kurojirai opened a swirling, black portal behind him. He stepped through without hesitation. At the very top of Hosu's water tower, the three villains emerged only seconds later. If I were you, I'd be a little more careful about who you try to hire. Figure out what you're trying to do before you go looking. I have to finish my call of this wretched city. Without waiting for a response, he leapt, landing in a roll on the nearest rooftop and taking off in a sprint. Shigaraki watched him as he moved from rooftop to rooftop. Kurojirai. The bartender looked in his direction. Yes, Shigaraki? Sensei said he had more Nomo ready. I want them brought here now. I'll show Stain what my convictions are. If that is what you wish, Shigaraki. The boy barked out a laugh. By tomorrow, they all better be talking about me. Midoriya checked his phone again. His and Snipe's train was traveling along at a rapid pace. He felt a tugging in his gut. Am I nervous about going to Tokyo, stressed out about Ida, or dealing with a shitload of anxiety? Let's find out. Snipe had replaced his long mask with a surgical mask, trying to avoid unnecessary attention. It wasn't really working. Plenty of the people around them had noticed him. Midoriya was fascinated by his gun. It was just sitting on the table between them. In hindsight, it might give off the wrong idea to anyone who didn't know about this particular hero. The further away they got from Yuzurifu, the more he thought of Ida. Ida, who was in Hosu. Hosu, where the hero killer currently was, unless he suddenly decided to change his modus operandi. Unlikely. It was clear to him before that Ida wasn't in the right headspace. He had been cold, distant and quiet. Their classmates knew not to ask about his brother. Everyone had heard the news by the end of the school day. The teachers didn't scold him for anything, not that he gave them a reason to. They never commented on sloppy work or his ever-deepening eye bags. They didn't filter out his internship offers coming from Hosu. Midoriya knew that might have been overly drastic, but his friend was looking for a serial killer. That kind of story never ends well. He checked his phone again. Their train would be passing Hosu. He messaged Ida about it. No response. It wasn't even read. He opened his messages with Hisashi. They'd been talking that morning. Shoyuta had informed him of their concerns. He'd had his own suspicions. He quickly typed out a message. Passing Hosu W Snipe. Hear anything? Hisashi responded immediately. Nope, tongue sticking out, keep me updated on your night. He closed his phone, tapping it against his thigh. Looking out the window, he thought for a moment. He'd felt wrong all day. Like a sense of foreboding panic. Something was going to happen, he knew it. He clicked on his visor for a distraction. Wheatley. You there, buddy? Check this place out. That's public transport I've heard so much about? Amazing, look at all these people. I mean, it's nothing like Aperture Science, obviously. We had much more efficient technology, but this is adorable. I'm proud of the humans that made this. Some scrappy engineer, no doubt. Midoriya let his tense muscles relax slightly. Talking to Wheatley always managed to calm him down a bit. Snipe spared him a glance before going back to his phone. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hey, we're nearing Hosu. Do you think there's something going on there? Wheatley paused. Well, that depends on what you're asking. I think something's going on, yes. For starters, the city's on fire, but also a man was just thrown at the train. Midoriya's thoughts stalled. Snipe dash. The train shook violently, throwing Midoriya from his seat. A man, presumably a hero, crashed through the thick metal walls of the train, landing heavily in front of him. Snipe pulled on his costume mask and hat, cocking his gun. The train ground to an abrupt halt. A giant, gray-green thing with wings started climbing in, and Snipe shot at it a few times in rapid succession. Midoriya stared at the thing. Exposed brain, skin pulled over flesh. Muscles that looked wrong. He was transported back to the USJ. That thing. Nomu? Snipe managed to force it back out, and was running towards the massive cavity in the side of the train. Kid, I'm giving you permission to protect yourself. Try and stay out of trouble. He leapt out after the beast, gun firing midair. Midoriya didn't know what to do. Wait. He jumped out himself, running along the tracks. The two were only getting farther and farther away from him. No basalt, so no portals. Shit. Come on. He slowed to a halt, looking out over the city. Embers burning bright cast some light on the illuminated city. It didn't look nearly as late as it was. He could hear the distant screams of civilians. He wrapped his arms around himself. What the fuck is happening? The Wheatley drone was hovering beside him, spinning around slowly. I might be able to answer that, actually. There's someone standing way up there. No idea how one of you fleshies got up that high, but there he is. The gentleman with the light-colored hair, I believe. Midoriya watched the video feed from his visor. There was a lone man standing on a water tower. He could just make out a swirling blackness behind him. Wheatley, can you zoom in? The feed adjusted itself. Shigaraki Tamura. Kurogyri. A city on fire. Oh fuck. Ida. He took off for the buildings. A portal and another later, he was sprinting across the rooftops, desperately trying to call his classmate. Voicemail. Okay. Where would a serial killer be found? Come on, Izuku. Wheatley, keep an eye on the alleys we pass. You got it. He thought back to all the articles he'd read about Stain. The hero killer. Strikes 5 times in one city before moving to the next one. Kills 5 pro-heroes. Others wounded, not pro-heroes. Civilians? People who got in his way? He rolled onto the next rooftop, using the zero-resistance nature of his legs to speed up again. Think. The last 4 were killed in different areas of the city. Like sectors. But of what? He pulled up a search engine on his visor. Search, Hosu Stain victims' locations. A split second later, he had 4 locations. 4 areas, all with plenty of surrounding alleys. Escape routes. He needed to go somewhere secluded, but with lots of ways out. He realized, after another portal leap, that he didn't even know if Ida found Stain. There's a chance Midoriya could land himself in a confrontation with a serial killer. Worth it. For Ida. Wheatley buzzed past his head. He could see the fires clearer from where he was. There had to be at least 4 Nomu things down there. He didn't know exactly what Nomu were, but Shoyuta had told him, after the USJ, that they found multiple samples of human DNA. They weren't natural, meaning someone or something was making them. She shuddered at the thought. That was aperture-level human experimentation. He needed to find Ida. Whether or not he was with a serial killer, he had to find him. Stain was getting really sick of being interrupted. Hero killer Stain. I'm here to bring you to justice. He slowly turned from the fake beneath his blade. Still breathing. Paralyzed. What? Pro heroes can't make arrests, any good hero should know that. But you're not one, are you? Another fool trying to stop my work, a child no less. The boy in the knight armor was standing rigidly, in a weak stance. Weak from inexperience. Run along, boy. I don't kill children where I can avoid it. I'm not a child. I'm the brother of a hero, a good hero that you harmed. He will never walk again, his hero career is over because of you. Stain wasn't focused on whatever crisis the boy was going through. He stood up from where he'd been hunched over native. Another fake. He took 2 small steps towards him. The boy didn't falter. Either stupidly brave or just stupid. You have a look in your eye, boy. You didn't alert the authorities when you found me. You're a child, hurt by something I did in the name of a better society. You want to kill me? The boy was going to go for him. Stain could pick apart his stance in a heartbeat. He struck first. A swipe of his katana, still wet with native's blood, and a lick was all it took. He hit the ground hard. Stain kicked his head, his helmet sent flying off, clattering away. The boy grunted. Pathetic. You're a worm boy. You came to kill me, yet you claim to be a hero. Serving in the name of Ingenium, is that it? He had tears in his eyes, his expression pinched. Don't say his name, you ruined him. I'll kill you if it means I can avenge him. Stain pointed his katana at the fake, bleeding out behind him. What about him? HM? You want to hurt me, but you said nothing about saving him. Some hero you're pretending to be. More concerned with hurting perceived villains than protecting the wounded. Your brother would be ashamed. The boy let out a whine, tears overflowing from his eyes. Stain eyed the wound he'd put in his shoulder. He didn't kill children, but this boy wouldn't let him leave without a fight. He could kill the pro, but he didn't know what blood type the boy had. He could jump up the second he turned away. He really hated variables. And this boy was all of them. He raised his katana, plunging it down into his shoulder. Like Shigaraki, he howled in pain. His blood spilled across the cold concrete, looking black in the moonlight. Ida, he believed was his name, if he really was the brother of Ingenium. Not that it would matter much longer. He pulled the blade down and tugged it out. Ida's howling turned into screaming. He was being far too loud. He'd need to finish this up quick. He kicked him hard in the temple, knocking him out. His screaming stuttered to a pathetic halt. He raised his katana once again, preparing to strike. There was a shout. The sound of light but quick footfall. Another fucking distraction. He looked up at the figure running towards him. Midoriya Izuku. The boy from the sports festival. The boy Shigaraki said not to kill. Interesting. Midoriya stopped a few meager meters from the serial killer. The hero killer. And Ida was on the ground beneath him, covered in blood. Ida dashed. He wasn't moving. He's alive. I knocked him out to keep his screaming from attracting attention. Evidently it wasn't enough. Midoriya glanced at the pro against the wall of the alley. He was breathing but shallowly. Also alive. Though, hopefully not for long. What are you doing here, man? What's there to gain from killing them? Stain stood up straighter, and Midoriya was made aware that the articles online were never quite right about Stain's height. The man was very tall. There's nothing to gain from murder, Midoriya? He felt a chill go down his spine. You know my name? I watched the sports festival. And a certain group leader has taken an interest in you, specifically. He knew it. He knew some sick fucks would be watching his class. Ah, Shigaraki talks about me? Stain looked at him for a moment. Though his face was obscured by his mask, Midoriya got the feeling he was raising an eyebrow. I feel the need to point out that people in this situation aren't usually quite so calm. Midoriya shrugged. I've had some practice. I'm actually shitting myself right now. The serial killer blinked. I don't know what interest Shigaraki has taken in you, but I admit I'm starting to understand why he's keeping an eye out. He looked between Ida and Stain. And the other hero. Nothing to gain from murder? Is that what you said? The man tilted his head. Yes. I'm not doing this work for kicks. Heroes these days need to be humbled. Reminded? Midoriya narrowed his eyes. Reminded of what, exactly? He had his visor open his texts. He silently thanked Hatsum for linking it to his phone. He was also incredibly grateful that what he saw couldn't be seen from the other side. He sent a text with his location to everyone in his contacts. It wasn't that many people, but still. Better than nothing. They need to be reminded that they're not celebrities that people should worship. They're civil servants working for the government. The fakes seem to think they deserve the title of hero regardless of how they behave. Tell me, why should someone like Endeavor be called a hero when he has the highest rate of accidental civilian deaths on record? After a certain point, you have to wonder if he even cares. Midoriya was standing with his hands on his hips. He realized that he was having a casual discussion with a serial killer. One that tried to murder his friend. One that could likely kill him very easily. Well, okay? Some people are shit at their jobs. What gives you the right to kill them for that? Stain let out a low chuckle. Obviously there's more to it than that. A hero is supposed to be someone selfless, who works to benefit of the public, not themselves. They shouldn't chase fame, they shouldn't hoard wealth. They shouldn't be able to use their hero license as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Why shouldn't someone go to prison if they commit a crime? The fakes do what they want, because they know they can get away with it. That's a lot to take in at once. Have you tried not killing people maybe? I feel like you'd be taken more seriously. Stain held up his blade, looking at the blood dripping down. Of course I tried that. To them, I was a joke. Delusional, looking for problems because I was miserable. I tried talking, I tried the legal route. I spent months trying to get through to these people, but they've all been brainwashed by this society. Unwitting accomplices? Midoriya thought back to Shoyuta and Hisashi. He thought about their conversations. A televised sports festival with children as the main event. Advertisements with the shining faces of pro heroes. Everyone being so okay with the things that horrified him. He thought he was an outsider because of his history. But, no, don't go down that path. I have to ask, why is All Might the one true hero to you? I can't walk down the street without seeing his face. All Might is one of the last good heroes. Despite being number one, he's humble. He doesn't bother with interviews, he donates most of his earnings to charity and he pays his workers more than a fair wage. Plus, he has a very modest apartment. He hardly is undeserving of his title. Midoriya gave him a look. You know where he lives? Stain rolled his eyes. Calm down, I don't plan on breaking in. I just wanted to see if he was truly as selfless as he appeared. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Sure. Awfully convenient answer. What? Nothing. Stain looked him up and down. What are you implying? I admire the man, nothing more. Aha. Stop that. All Might is a hero. This fake claims he is a hero. He deserves to die. Midoriya held up his hands. Oh, I need context. Stain pointed his bloodied sword to the hero, still bleeding, leaning against the wall. He's appropriating Native American culture. He staged crimes in populated areas to increase his popularity. 7 of his workers have ongoing lawsuits against him on the grounds of sexual assault. How, in all honesty, can he be called a hero? Midoriya swallowed dryly. I'll admit, those are some surprisingly good arguments. He looked back at Native, breathing slowly. Bleeding from his side. He pulled up the search engine on his visor. And yep, Stain was not lying. In fact, he hadn't even listed all the shit this guy had done. Midoriya felt a little less worried about him. He eyed the blood pooled around his wound. You're not going to let me help him? Stain didn't feel the need to lie. There would be no point. It's been far too long. He'll bleed out before you get him to a hospital. He looked at his feet. Snipe would be so pissed with him. There was a glint of something. He looked up right as a knife embedded itself in Native's chest with a squelch. A splash of blood hit his visor. Midoriya could feel the tension piling in the air. You fascinate me. He looked from the dead man to the serial killer. What? Stain pointed a dagger at him accusatorily. You didn't react just now. A man died in front of you, by my hand, and you aren't trying to kill me. Midoriya eyed Native. Why is that interesting? I've never seen it in anyone but villains before, the lack of reaction. You said you wanted to help him a moment ago. Why? Midoriya looked at him from under his green fringe. Because it's the right thing to do? Stain smiled. It made Midoriya's insides curl. It might have been, but do you think that because you genuinely believe it, or because that's what you're supposed to think? What's that supposed to mean? The killer tilted his head again. Midoriya wanted him to fuck off. I think that you're capable of extreme cruelty, Midoriya Izuku. You've let me go on and on about my vision. Now I'd like to ask you, what is your opinion of the Hero Commission? Midoriya got the feeling his answer was not the kind of thing he should be saying. I don't trust it. Setting up classes schools to train children, dictating exactly how the entrance exams are to be run with no exceptions, broadcasting the future generations of heroes while they're still growing, showing off their powers and their weaknesses. None of that screams innocent to me. Stain's smile grew. Correct answer. Midoriya certainly didn't feel like he'd answered right. In fact, he didn't want to be here anymore. He didn't like that he was agreeing with this guy. It was true though, in areas where Stain operated, the heroes were more efficient. Less property damage, less accidents, less media attention for their work. Started behaving the way Stain believed heroes should be. But was that because they genuinely thought it was how they should be, or because they didn't want to die? Can I ask you something? Stain gave a short, quick nod. I guess since I've been here, I've been calling the bad guys criminals. But everyone else has been calling them villains. I didn't think it was weird at first, but everyone says villain now. Terrorists are being put on the same level as the likes of petty thieves. Is that weird of me? Stain looked far too amused at his inner conflict. I have to say, you're the first person I've met who doesn't call every lawbreaker a villain. It's refreshing. Empathy is part of it, Midoriya. You're not condemning everyone to the same black and white philosophy that the rest of these sheep do. He really hated himself for the relief he felt. Why of all people, it was a serial killer that understood him. It left a very bad taste in his mouth. He looked at Ida on the ground. His breathing had been getting more rapid. He would probably be waking up soon. Are you going to let me leave? Stain wiped the blood off his blade with his cloak. You could have left the second you stepped foot in this alley. I don't kill children where I can avoid it. Midoriya looked back at Ida. Why are you trying to kill him, then? He looked at his reflection in the blade. He interrupted my work. He came here to kill me, not to bring me to justice. He has no intention of letting me live. And why, all because I attacked his brother? Is he only here because my actions directly affected him? He had no good motivations for coming after me, and he made no attempts to save an injured man. He is no hero. Midoriya couldn't believe that Ida not only ignored all their friends, ignored all the help being offered and ignored him when he knew what he was planning to do in Hosu. He literally could have been arrested for the murder of a serial killer. Ida could have been charged with a homicide tonight. And that would have been the end. He ground his teeth. Okay, that all sounds really bad. I agree with you there, but he's grieving. His brother meant everything to him, and now he has to retire because you attacked him. He's young. We're only in our first year, we've barely been in UA for 2 months. He still has a lot to learn, and so do I. Do you really believe that people can't change? Stain shrugged with one shoulder. Maybe, but I find it hard to believe a person could change that much. Taking a human life is not easy, especially the first time. What do you think would have happened if he caught me off guard? He would have done everything in his power to kill me. Midoriya glanced back down at his friend. Come on, you think that I'm weird or interesting or whatever? Then trust me when I say he can change. I'll make sure of it, just give me this chance to help him. Stain huffed, smiling. What freaked him out more than anything was that his smile was not malicious in the slightest. I really don't think we trust each other yet. But let me ask you one question. What are you doing here, Midoriya? Midoriya was stuck on the yet part of that sentence. What do you mean? How did you end up in this alley? Midoriya scratched his neck. Ida had been acting weird after you attacked his brother. I tried reaching out to him, all our friends did, but he didn't want to talk to us about it. When I found out he was coming here for his internship, I had a feeling he was coming to look for you. Stain nodded, slipping his katana back into its sheath. Midoriya figured he might as well keep going. I tried to talk him out of it. I spoke to our teacher, and he said he alerted Manuel, but neither of us had hope. I was going to Tokyo when my train got blitzed by one of Shigaraki's nomas. My mentor jumped in to help, but they got away from me. I realized, with the city on fire and with you here, that I might never see my friend again. I couldn't just sit by while he could have been killed. No offense. Stain smirked. None taken. Yeah, that's the story. I scoured the alleys from the rooftops, looking for you. Ida's smart, I had a feeling he'd find you. So I just needed to find you as well. And here we are. Here we are indeed. You out yourself in harm's way because you wanted to protect your friend? Midoriya blinked. Yeah, I did. I've accomplished what I set out to do tonight. I suppose I can let you go, provided you don't do anything stupid. Can you do that? Midoriya's visor lit up. Wheatley had been hovering above the alleyway the whole time. The little light on his visor meant that someone was near. From the footage Wheatley was picking up, it was Todoroki. Midoriya swallowed. Well, that depends on your definition of stupid. And before you say anything, I thought you were going to kill me. Stain looked beyond him, to the mouth of the alley. The small space was lit up with the light of a raging fire. Midoriya spun to face his friend. Todoroki's eyes moved from native to Stain to Midoriya. Midoriya could pinpoint the exact second that he understood the severity of the situation he just ran into. Midoriya. I called the authorities, and more heroes are coming this way. His eyes lingered on the knife in Native's chest. Polarity, stay calm. We need to get out of here. Todoroki was showing more emotion than Midoriya had ever seen from him. To hell with that, is Ida okay? Out cold? Are you bleeding? Midoriya glanced at the blood still on his visor. Natives. He heard the boy's shaky breath next to him. Stain had his hand on the hilt of his blade. Midoriya really wished he'd left with Ida while he had the chance. Todoroki lowered his stance. Todoroki, come on, we can't take him down. We can't pick up Ida, he'd never let us leave. Midoriya silently hoped Stain wouldn't tell Todoroki about their conversation. Ida was waking up on the concrete, Native was dead, and Todoroki was in mortal danger. Midoriya was losing his damn mind. Todoroki gave no warning, slamming his right foot into the ground. Giant spikes of ice spread out in the direction of the serial killer. Stain jumped back, and Midoriya had a feeling he knew what was coming. A knife the length of his forearm went flying in Todoroki's direction. Midoriya snatched it out of the air, the blade doing nothing to his hands. Todoroki stared at him in shock for a split second. Stain was on them again. To be honest though, he wasn't really going for Midoriya. Just Todoroki. And one more knife made its way into Native's chest somewhere along the way. The combination of ice and fire was making the alley incredibly humid. Midoriya took the smallest windows of opportunity to move Ida behind them with portals. The boy had woken up to an eyeful of bloodied friends and a dead hero. He still couldn't move. Midoriya looked up from him to see Stain. There was a blade flying at Todoroki. There was a blade flying at Todoroki, who was thrown off balance. Midoriya moved. He pushed himself into Todoroki, shoving the boy out of the way. Stain's dagger hit his chest. There was static in his ears after he hit the ground. Midoriya. He blinked his eyes open. Stain was gone. Ida had his eyes wide open, staring at him. Todoroki looked distraught, gripping at the fabric of his jacket. Oddly enough, he didn't feel any pain. In fact, he felt very little different. He looked down at his chest. Well, this is embarrassing. Midoriya tugged the fabric of his shirt up, showing off the white disc at the center of his chest. The disc where the knife had hit. The static he was hearing cleared. He tugged the knife out of the disc. It hadn't gone in that deep. Todoroki looked incredibly confused. Ida's hand twitched. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet. His shoulder was bleeding sluggishly. Midoriya? Todoroki? I'm incredibly sorry. I don't know what I would have done if he killed you. I'm sorry. I should have spoke with you in school. I regret my actions immensely. Native's death is my fault, and I take full responsibility. Todoroki looked away. Midoriya felt bad for him. Ida, while I appreciate it, we should go. Stain vanished. They wasted no time in sprinting for the mouth of the alley.